Good afternoon. I'm Senator Gary Daniels from District 11, and I need to mute. There we go. Today we'll be holding a meeting of the Senate Finance Committee. Before we get started, I'll read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chair of the Senate Finance Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and selected legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously watch and/or listen to the meeting on Zoom or YouTube and via phone by following the directions and links provided on the General Court website. We have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar. We are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email remotesenate@leg.state.nh.us or call 603-271-6931. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, it will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Finally, let's start the meeting by taking roll call attendance. When each member states his or her presence, please also state where you are and if anyone else is in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. I will call the roll. Senator Gaida.
Senator Guide, I'm in the Senate chamber.
Senator Reagan. Senator D'Alessandro. Senator Hennessy.
Good afternoon, Erin Hennessy from Littleton, President of the Senate Chamber.
Senator Morse. Senator Rosenwald. Is it possible to bring her in? Okay. I believe Senator Rosenwald will be joining us momentarily. I know that she had a conflict in testifying on a bill. And I am Senator Gary Daniels of Milford, and I am here in the Senate chambers with the staff. Okay.
Hi, Deb, I'm here.
Senator Rosenwald, you may want to take off the volume on your speaker. I think that's what's causing the feedback.
Yeah, I'm gonna get rid of this other meeting.
Okay, can you just announce your presence in this meeting, please?
Yes, Senator Cindy Rosenwald, District 13. I'm in my office in the State House, and I apologize for this. I'll fix it.
Okay, thank you, Senator Rosenwald. Our first order of business is a pledge of allegiance, and I invite people to join me. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first presentation this afternoon is with the Liquor Commission. And I see Commissioner Malika there. Good afternoon. You're muted.
Hey, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Joseph Malika, Chairman of the New Hampshire Liquor Commission. With me is our COO, Rose Wyant, our CFO, Tina Demers, and our Chief of Enforcement, Mark Armaganian. Tina will start the presentation and take you through it. Thank you very much.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Tina Demers, CFO for the Liquor Commission. We would like to thank you for the opportunity to present our FY 22-23 budget as passed by the House. Starting on page 2. Starting on page 2, introduction, we first wanted to remind everyone that the Liquor Commission is self-funded in a separate liquor fund outside of the general fund. No general fund appropriations are used to maintain operations. The commission operates 69 retail outlets, 9 state-owned and 60 are leased. They generated over $617 million in net retail sales in FY20. Our product is shipped out of 2 warehouses. One is state-owned and the other is contracted with DHL. Liquor revenue is transferred to the general fund after deducting administrative costs and transferring to the Alcohol Abuse Prevention and Treatment Fund and the Granted Advantage Healthcare Trust Fund. We also have beer tax and permit revenue that is transferred in a separate line item to the general fund. The budget presented is the level of funding passed by the House and does not support the level of funding necessary to accomplish the Commission's legislative duties under RSA 176(3), which is to optimize the profitability of the Commission, maintain proper controls, assume responsibility for the effective and efficient operations of the Commission, and provide services to the customers of the Commission. The budget passed by the House in the language in HB2 changes the Liquor Commission's mission by eliminating all law enforcement positions, changes the name of the division to reflect the elimination of the enforcement mission, and eliminates the word investigator and replaces it with licensing specialists in all relevant sections of Title 13. On page 3 are the revenue estimates that we will be providing to House Ways and Means on Monday, along with the 2 laws that govern the liquor fund transfers. For the purpose of this presentation, we won't go into the details today, but I do want to highlight lines 4 to 6. Starting with line 4, our revised transfer to the general fund estimates. This fiscal year is $133 million, and FY 22 and 23 are a little over $141 million. Line 5 are the estimates provided to the House and approved by the House. And line 6 is the difference, which is an increase in transfers to the general fund of $3 to $4 million each year. This increase is a result of recent sales trends and increased sales estimates. We do want to go on the record that at this point, it would be very difficult to calculate the financial impact the proposed changes would have on the Division of Enforcement and what effect it could have to the Commission, the general fund, and businesses throughout the state. Because we have no way of knowing the potential impact, we are providing revenue estimates reflecting a slight change to sales, keeping the expenses to sales percentage at our historical level of 10%. However, we strongly feel there will be a greater disruption to revenues in operations. We'll address the potential impact more at the end of the presentation, but from a revenue standpoint, we feel that if all of our current positions were funded, we could still achieve these revenue estimates. On page 4, list the major budget categories, and the numbers correspond to the table on page 5. And in the interest of time, I won't read through all of them, but I will highlight the changes from the governor's recommended budget to the budget passed by the House. So on page 5, you can see under FY23 House changes, the salary and benefit reduction totals $2.5 million, and that's the result of eliminating the 20 law enforcement positions. And the $1.1 million, we requested to move the funding for our new D365 maintenance and support contract from the contracts for operations class line to the technology software class line. I also want to point out that in the budget, you will see changes in the indirect cost line in some of the accounting units for FY21 to 22, because the total for the agency was historically budgeted and paid for out of one accounting unit, the 1023 financial administration. And in FY22-23, the budget was reallocated to the accounting units that were provided by DAS. On page 6 and 7 are pie charts for each of the years. You'll see the percentages are similar in each year. By class, salaries and benefits are the largest category at 56%. And by accounting unit, store operations makes up more than 75% of our budget. So this is FY22, and you can see FY23. It's very similar. We go on to page 8, the organizational structure. The commission is made up of 3 divisions that report to the chairman and the deputy commissioner. The chart shows each division with the area of responsibilities listed and the number of unclassified and classified positions assigned to each. Under the division of enforcement, the items struck out in red are the proposed changes. 33 is the number of current positions, and 13 is the number of positions that would remain if the 20 sworn positions were eliminated. So on page 9, 10, and 11, we've provided a breakdown by activity for the Office of the Commission, followed by the Division of Administration and the Division of Marketing and Merchandising. When building our budget, we worked hard to minimize increases. Therefore, you'll see the primary budget changes are the same for each year, each of the divisions. FY22 changes are a result of the reallocation of the indirect costs, and FY23 increases are for the 27th pay period. And then there's the additional $1 million in marketing and merchandising for the D365 maintenance and support contract. On each of the pages, there is a pie chart that breaks out the 3 major budget categories. And then we also provided the number of positions listed by department. So I'll scroll through so that you can see page 9, the Office of the Commission, 2 unclassified, 2 classified, the Division of Administration. We have the departments under there is Finance, Human Resources, intern outlet auditors, and inventory control and legal. And under the Division of Marketing and Merchandising, you have marketing and merchandising, our outlet stores, and the warehouse. So on page 12 are the budget amounts for our workers' comp and unemployment comp, which are based on historical trends. And that brings us to page 13, the Division of Enforcement. FY22 is level funded, and FY23 is decreasing by $2.3 million as a result of the proposed elimination of the 20 law enforcement positions. The division provides education and support for over 5,800 licensees and collected over $18 million in revenue in FY20. And at this point, I will turn it back over to the chairman to speak further about the proposed changes to the Division of Enforcement.
Thank you, Tina. Again, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. On pages 14, 15, and 16, you'll see comments provided on the HB2 fiscal worksheet. I'm not going to go through them. They're just there for your perusal and obvious reference. And having been a businessman my whole life and not wanting to waste time or mince words, I'm going to respectfully cut to the chase. We cannot cut 20 positions and not envision that it's not going to have a negative effect on the commission's revenue and on our licensees, who are our customers and constituents. The proposed resource cut is a total disconnect from our New Hampshire Liquor Commission mantra of customer service first, which is paramount to any successful business. The New Hampshire Liquor Commission Enforcement Division is a specialized law enforcement agency dealing with the liquor laws of Title 13. Local law enforcement does not possess these skills in this specialized field. The education done by the division with schools and businesses in the state is unparalleled in any of the other 17 control states. It would take years and millions of state revenue dollars to rebuild and retrain this division, only to achieve the same goals that are currently being accomplished today. And believe me, public safety would suffer. The service that our customers, who are our business partners in every corner of the state, have come to expect from the division would severely be diminished. And I'm certain that's something that not any of us want to have happen. This not only includes liquor compliance, licensing and training, but also tobacco compliance and licensing. The on-premise segment of the alcohol beverage industry around the globe has been severely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Not allowing the businesses in our state to renew or reopen seasonally by delaying licensing in a timely manner would only exacerbate this issue. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank the members of the committee, and I'd like to remind the committee that as of April 18th, 2021, total sales this year for the Liquor Commission are up 3.2% or $19.6 million. And we would be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any questions from the committee? I cannot see. Commissioner, can you take down the sharing?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I see no questions. Oh, excuse me, Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, there must have been some motivation for the House to eliminate those 20 positions. And I have heard anecdotally some of those. I'd like an explanation of what precipitated this significant reduction.
That question is directed to me, Senator. Thank you very much. Senator, I think that some of this probably comes from the audit that was done by the Liquor Commission, that was done on the Liquor Commission by the LBA. And, the chief is here and the COO are here, and we're happy to discuss how much of that audit has been finalized and where we sit on it. But in answering the question, I'm not 100% sure where this came from, because if we look at it from a business standpoint, I would have to say that it's one of those things that I don't believe that the constituents want, that the licensees want, or that anybody we do business with around the state wants. So with that being said, I'd be happy to have the chief step in and tell you where we're at on the audit, if that's something that you'd be interested in.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have heard, again, I have not read that audit, but I have heard that there are assertions, okay, that basically the management of the enforcement officers and their patrols and were not managed well. and that's not an accusation, that's what I have heard, that we had a high concentration of visits to sales outlets, if you will, bars and inspections and stuff located nearby, but not near as many done in terms of per sales site, meaning per bar, per whatever inspection wise. Again, if you could elucidate a little bit on that.
Certainly. I'll let the chief answer that question, but in being a businessman in the state for 15 years and being a licensee as well, I would say that the enforcement division will visit the licenses that they need to visit, the licenses where there's problems, and they will visit other licenses, but obviously they will not do it as frequently. We're going to fish where the fish are, and we're going to go where the problems are and help those licensees address those problems. Chief?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your question, Senator Gaida. First and foremost, at risk of repeating some of the stuff that you've already heard in other hearings, when I first came in back in the beginning of fiscal 18, we had a plan of compliance that needed consistency, and we created it. We created it with predictive analytics through hiring an analyst to look at where, for lack of a better term, where frequent flyers are, like the chairman eloquently said it just a second ago. With that in mind, we had to do that, and we had to do that with better management oversight because of the fact that we were not at the time working as efficiently as we could have been. We had lost 7 positions, and quite frankly, we had to have investigators that were 3- and 4-dimensional and not just focused on the element of enforcement. So it was at that time that myself and the deputy chief got together. We did our assessment. We figured out very quickly that our investigators needed to not only perform their regulatory duties along with enforcement, but they had to audit, and we created our biggest foundation to our plan, and that is our education piece. And everything we do starts with education. It not only starts with education, but we believe the success to compliance is educating our licensees, which has created a beyond great partnership and collaboration between us and the industry. Ever since this document has gone public, I've had an overwhelming amount of phone calls coming in from industry claiming support and asking what they can do to be there for us, because they believe that disruption of the system will create a shortfall in revenue in every tier, whether it's our wholesalers, our restaurant and lodging, or our manufacturers. The consistency is paramount here, and they believe that the fairness in starting with accountability from an educational standpoint has been paramount in their success. With that in mind, I will say that I echo the point of the chairman. I don't know where this has come from, but I will say that from my previous position over at State Police, with 28 years of service there and several commands, and my command now here, that this division is operating in 2021 extremely efficiently and effectively. And our relationship with the industry is beyond reproach and is paramount to our success and their success.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none?
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Oops, sorry, Senator D'Alessandro.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Malika, our performance, given the pandemic, given the problems that we faced, our performance was outstanding, was it not? I mean, the numbers were better than we had anticipated and better than were plugged into the budget. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator. Yes, they were.
And on the other side, in the enforcement section, I deal with a number of entities in my district. I think I have more than my share of those who are producing liquid refreshment. I have had no concerns and no problems every time I've made a comment or made a suggestion to the commission. I think the answer has been positive and the work that has been done has been positive. So from that standpoint, the change in enforcement is mind-boggling to me. What from your perspective, what's the rationale behind this? What was the rationale brought forth in the House comments? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, I can't speak to the mindset behind why this idea of defunding the police at the Liquor Commission has come forward. But I can tell you that from FY15 to FY21, no change in employees at the enforcement has taken place from a number of employees that they have. We have not added additional sworn or civilian. However, the programs and classes from FY15 to FY20 are up 30%. So we're out in the field 30% more. They've gone from 149 classes and programs to 190 programs and classes. Licensees from FY15 to FY20 have grown by 12%. So we went from 5262 licenses in FY15 to 5872 licenses in FY20. Again, up 12%. And the enforcement revenue from FY15 to FY20 went from 17.2 million to 18.5 million, up 7.5%. So the liquor revenue in general from FY15 to FY20 went from 647 million to 766 million. So our revenue in those 5 years is up 119 million or 18%. So I see nothing negative in that we've done more classes, we've allowed more licensees to open in the state and out of the state with the direct ship. Enforcement's revenue is up. The Liquor Commission revenue overall is up. So I'm finding it very difficult to find any reason why we would change the aesthetics of how the Liquor Commission or how the Division of Enforcement is run.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Commissioner and staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Have a great weekend. Thank you very much.
Have a good afternoon. Our next presentation is with the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification. Good afternoon, Lindsay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Lindsay Courtney, Executive Director, Office of Professional Licensure and Certification. And if I may, if it's easier, I'm happy to share my screen. I do have a hopefully a brief presentation. And okay. So I just wanted to start off because I really think that the budget that that's proposed by the House really underscores the work that we're trying to do in the agency already. So just briefly, OPLC is the office that oversees the administration of 54 occupational licensing boards, councils, and commissions within the state of New Hampshire, as well as the prescription drug monitoring program. The budget as proposed by the House in HB 2 does propose to transfer the PDMP to the Department of Health and Human Services and to transfer the Mechanical Licensing Board from the Department of Safety to the office. I think it is one of the only occupational licensing boards that's left in the state that's not within the office. And so with the exception of the prescription drug monitoring program, we essentially accomplished two tasks in the office. The first is to really assist the boards with licensing individuals with professional backgrounds, such as doctors, nurses, speech language pathologists. And we also ensure compliance with the laws through investigations and disciplinary actions regarding licensure. And to be clear, we are not a law enforcement agency. So although we do participate in enforcement activities, it is strictly administrative in nature. And so we are a small agency, and we're, of course, relatively new, being established through the budget process in 2015. At present, we only have 66 permanent classified positions, but I do want to note that the impact on the state of New Hampshire is quite vast. Last fiscal year alone, we had 223,000 occupational licenses in New Hampshire that were active under OPLC or its boards. And this is really a 29% increase from the fiscal year 2019 alone. At present, we are averaging about 150 complaints a month, which is a dramatic increase from the numbers from our annual report of 2020. And we're presently conducting about 3,000 inspections for 3 professions alone. And we anticipate that with the addition of mechanical licensing, that number will obviously increase. And I think it's important to note, obviously, when talking about the budget as it relates to OPLC, that we are a self-funded agency, that our revenue that we take in must be rationally related to actually carrying out the activities of the agency as opposed to other activities within the state. So the purpose of the licensing boards obviously is to protect the public. But from my perspective, based on the goals set forth in RSA 310A, I think the goal of the agency is slightly different. It is to promote efficiency and economy in occupational licensing. And so I believe that OPLC's objectives is really to ensure that licensing is efficient so as to reduce unnecessary workforce barriers. There are 2 major barriers at this point as it pertains to licensing. The time it takes to obtain a license and the time it takes for someone to re-enter the workforce after a complaint has been filed and a disciplinary action has ensued. And so through the fiscal year 22 and 23 budget, OPLC desires to eliminate unnecessary workforce barriers by significantly reducing the time frame for licensure and significantly reducing the time frame for investigations and disciplinary proceedings. And obviously, this will better protect the public as well as the due process rights of licensees. So we'd like to accomplish this goal by really maximizing efficiency and workflow and fully funding the agency's personnel and technology needs. So we're already headed in that direction of achieving efficiency, and we're doing that by maximizing our existing resources at this point. But over the fiscal year 21, we've embarked on an agency reorganization project to organize the staff based on job function in lieu of subject matter. So prior to our reorganization project, our staff were organized in much the same manner as they had been when the staff worked directly for the boards. So staff would perform all sorts of functions, including licensing and disciplinary, and it would be spread across based on the board. We wanted to streamline that by bringing all the staff together who perform licensing and bringing all the staff together who perform investigations, and really an effort to make that process more efficient. So that we began that project in July 2020, and you'll see that that project is referenced in HB 2 as we try to formally reorganize the agency. The other thing that we've done is centralize our mail intake and finance. It sounds silly, but OPLC has pretty much operated up until the last year like it did with 54 different boards. So we had 54 different ways of processing the mail and 54 different ways of handling checks. And obviously that's not efficient. So we centralized that in December of 2020. Also centralized the customer service. So now we have a dedicated customer service unit to respond to licensees in a timely fashion, as opposed to having single sources of failure throughout the agency. And we are currently working to adopt all policies and procedures for boards concerning investigations and licensing. Some of that is tied up in legislation right now, just to clarify that OPLC has that authority, but that is a project that we're working on. The other piece of this that we've been trying to do is leverage technology. And you may know that a lot of our licensing has been done both in paper. Some of it's been done online, not very well. And so we really want to leverage technology to increase the efficiencies in turning around licensing. And so we, beginning in January, opened a project to move all licensing renewal applications online, and that was complete by the end of March. We are now opening a project to move all online initial applications. And we expect that's going to take about 64 weeks with our existing resources. But we're currently working on a project plan that will take about 2 weeks per board to accomplish that. We did develop a new website in March of 2021 with a goal of really highlighting and really catering to the customer experience. A lot of the reason why people approach or interface with our office is obviously to obtain licensure, and we want to focus on that. And we're focusing really on document management, trying to scan in all of our documentation to reduce error rates and render information easier to access, with the goal of obviously increasing public transparency. So this slide really just demonstrates what we're trying to do with our reorganization project. So you'll see up until FY21, there were 3 divisions: a division of health professions, division of technical professions, and administration. And we had 54 different ways of doing mail, 54 different ways of doing licensing, 54 different ways of doing investigations. Really, honestly, not much change since the boards operated on their own, except that there were 2 division directors and executive director. And so we want to move OPLC into the next phase and really carry out the purpose that 310A directs us to do. And through that, we are seeking to reorganize. So you'll see that we are seeking to create a division of licensing with 1 licensing process, a division of enforcement with 1 investigative process, and so on. So OPLC, through the House proposed operating budget, really proposes to maximize efficiencies in agency operations in a number of ways. As I mentioned, we would like to formally reorganize the agency to divide staff based on function. And you'll see that's reflected in HB2. The FY22 and 23 operating budget also eliminates the accounting units for health professions and technical professions and establishes accounting units for enforcement and licensing. And you'll see that on pages 206 to 210. And we move all expenses to administration except payroll. That was really a decision we made. I think we could have gone either way, but with the creation of new divisions, it's unclear what the expenses are going to be unrelated to payroll. And so several agencies do have the majority of expenses paid out of administration, and we thought that would be best practice for us moving forward, at least over the next 2 years. The other thing that this budget does is it significantly reduces our part-time Class 50 budget. And what we wanted to do is utilize some of those funds to fund full-time positions. One of the initial observations I made when I came to OPLC was that a large portion of our staff are part-time. And this really has been a barrier to achieving efficiency. In essence, people were coming to OPLC as a gateway to state service. So we were constantly losing people and having to retrain people. And it's just a barrier to achieving that efficiency and continuity of workflow. The other thing that this budget proposes to do is establish OPLC as a 125% agency. That language is in all of the board practice acts, such that the boards, I shouldn't say all of the board practice acts, a lot of the board practice acts, and then it's otherwise dictated by Supreme Court precedent. But we really think that OPLC itself should be 125% agency, such that OPLC can't charge in revenue in excess of 125% of expenses. We are proposing to eliminate the double accounting method to increase transparency. So previously, OPLC was double billing itself, double billing administration, which as not a finance person, that was confusing to me. And it was really unclear how much money we had coming in. And so to increase transparency, we are proposing to eliminate that double billing method. And you'll see that's reflected in the exhibit that I've provided too. And also continue to leverage technology. And you'll see that our class 27 does have a substantial increase in proposed appropriations, but there is a reason for that, obviously, to carry out these projects that are needed in order to move the agency forward. So the increase in appropriations from FY20 and FY21 adjusted authorized largely comprise the following classes. Class 10 are classified permanent positions. It includes 11 new positions, not including the Mechanical Licensing Board, which I do believe has 7 positions. Class 20, this increase is really as a result of OPLC moving a lot of its operations online, because we have credit card processing fees associated with that, and the increased online transactions. There is an increase in class 20. Parenthetically, though, we are capturing those service fees when we do process those transactions, starting with a recent rule that OPLC just promulgated through jail cars. So this is really a pass-through. Class 22, it was a result of our unexpected move to Eagle Square. You may know that OPLC physically relocated from Philbrook, which was a state office building, back in August. And the cost associated with our current space is about $75,000 more than what we are paying for Philbrook. So that's the increase in class 22. And in class 27, we have a number of technology projects that we'd like to accomplish this next biennium. We do have existing funding, and I think it's important to know that the fees obviously must bear a rational relation to the licensing and disciplinary process. So in terms of our expenses, you will see that there is an increase in expense from $9 million in FY20 adjusted for double billing up to FY23, $12.2 million adjusted for mechanical licensing. We are anticipated to take in more than sufficient revenue with our current fee structure, so there will be no need for us to increase fees as a result of the increase in appropriations. Essentially, it just decreases the amount that we've been previously lapsing, which is most likely above that 125% threshold anyways. So as I mentioned, class 27, I just wanted to highlight some of the needs in class 27, and I know obviously this will be covered by DOIT. But a primary expense is the addition of our staff, or the DOIT staff embedded within OPLC. We would not have been able to accomplish our new website or the move to online licensing without these additional positions that were approved by Governor and Council back in January of 2020. The other proposed projects are an investigation software and inspection software. Currently, all of the processing is being done manually, which is obviously not efficient and requires additional personnel to manage. Document management software, we have paper all over the place, including in storage, and we're currently working on being able to obtain legislative authority to adopt a retention policy across the agency. But for now, we have a lot of paper, and we'd like to scan that all in, digitize that, and eliminate the paper documents that we no longer need. And we do need to perform critical software updates as recommended by DOIT. In terms of class 10, this budget does include the addition of 11 new positions, including 2 hearings examiners, an administrator 3, program assistant 2s, investigative paralegals, and a nursing program specialist 4. Right now, one of our bureaus is being led by a part-time individual, and our current hearing examiner is also part-time. And as I mentioned earlier, that's not really conducive to ensuring an efficient process. So that is the basis really for those requests. And then the operating budget also contemplates transferring 7 existing positions from Department of Safety to OPLC. Do want to mention that the what is not included in the House operating budget, or is included in the House operating budget, but which does not support the professionals health program, is that class 531 impaired programs. The amount appropriated according to the House operating budget, I don't think will be sufficient to support that program based on the likely contract that actually is moving to GNC May 5th, I believe. And but the good thing is that RSA 310A established a dedicated non-lapsing fund for this purpose, and OPLC is receiving $8 per licensee per fiscal year for those licensees who participate in the program. So again, this is just a pass-through, but one request that I would make for a modification to the budget as proposed by the House would be to increase appropriations for New Hampshire PHP to $680,000 in FY22 and $738,000 in FY23, just to avoid us having to go to GNC and do an accept and expend. Again, that's a pass-through. And then I did want to highlight the differences and that you'll see in the major classes. It's a little bit difficult because we have the double billing in FY20 and FY21. But I've outlined it here. And again, the actual total in terms of appropriations in FY20 is about 9 million, and FY22 as proposed by the House is 11.9. So I will stop sharing my screen. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator D'Alessandro?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just looking at the book, there are some significant changes from 2021 authorized to what the governor and the House have suggested as you move forward. For example, rents and leases, you were at 1,700 and you're going to 393,000 in 22 and in 23. Okay, now that's a move, correct? I mean, it's got to be because you moved from the old Philbrook building someplace else. So is that what you're paying for rent as you move forward?
So what we're paying in rent as we move forward is what's been proposed, the 393,000. And I'm trying to find the appropriate line item because we were previously paying rent. It wasn't obviously in class 22 because it was leases other than state. And I do have Jason Richard, our business finance director, on the line. If I could just bring him in because I want to clarify which class this is coming out of.
Okay, great. Great, but that's a result of the move, is that correct?
It's a result of the move. We were previously paying around $250,000. I want to get the precise number for you. We were previously paying about $250,000 in a different class. With the transfer or the move to Philbrook, which is not a lease or not a state building, that increase is about 75,000 to class 22 to be about 393,000 a year.
Okay. May I continue, Mr.
Follow up?
Chairman? Oh, okay, thank you. Under organizational dues, you spent nothing in 20 and 21, and you're going to spend 87,000 in 22 and 23. That's a pretty good jump, isn't it?
So, Senator, yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. I would actually, because it's confusing, we moved all expenses to administration. So previously, the majority of our expenses were listed in the health division accounting unit and the technical division accounting unit. So if you look on the presentation, the exhibit A, it'll actually show you that there is no increase in the number of, or in the amount of dues, organizational dues. It's just that we're changing the accounting unit that it's paid out of.
Oh, okay. Now, okay, I've got a number of these things, and maybe somebody can fill me in on these at a later date, but one further question, impaired programs. You spent nothing in 20 and 21, and you're gonna spend a $500,000 in 22 and another $500,000 in 23. What were your impaired programs?
So we did have impaired programs previously. It's the New Hampshire Professionals Health Program, but it was previously under the Health Division Accounting Unit. So if you look at, let me see, page 208 of the House to Governor report, you will see that 531 in FY 2020, we did out of the Health Division Accounting Unit, actually spend $471,000. And then as a result of a new contract that was executed and approved by GNC, we had an adjusted authorized appropriations for $542,000, which is the equivalent of what's currently proposed.
Okay, all right, I see those numbers. Okay, one further one.
Follow up?
What about the 7 existing positions that are transferred from the Department of Safety? What are those?
So the Department of Safety, as I understand it, they have 6 inspectors and 1 licensing clerk that currently assist the Mechanical Licensing Board that are going to come over to OPLC, assuming that this proposed budget is passed.
So further question. So will they be transferred to you and you will pick up the expense?
Correct, because what will also be transferred is the revenue associated with the Mechanical Licensing Board. So all licensing boards are essentially self-funded. So mechanical licensing presumably does have fees associated with licensing that it uses to pay for those 7 positions. So that revenue and those positions will come over to OPLC.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further questions? I do have one. Going back to the previous budget, I'll say the previous budget term, the governor had I'll call it a task force that was meeting to look at licensed occupations and actually trying to reduce those. And I was just kind of curious if that still exists. And if it does, where are we on that? Because I'm seeing that you're asking for increases in funding, and one would think that as we reduce the number of occupations needing licensure, that the cost would go down.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, so I'm not familiar with that task force, so I have not been asked to participate. We are, and so I don't think it's ongoing, but I don't want to say definitively. We do currently have a project through our contract with CLEAR, and they are doing an analysis of several professions, and I anticipate having those reports. I had hoped to have them today, but I anticipate having those reports next week that will provide an analysis of certain entry-level positions. But to go back, we're not seeking an increase in funding. We do have obviously the funding coming in. We are seeing an increase in appropriations. And I do want to mention that's been a longstanding concern that I have. OPLC doesn't at this point have the authority, or we do not believe we have the authority to modify fees on behalf of the boards. And so our lapse really is in excess of what it should be. When you consider that only 125%, our revenue should not exceed 125% of our expenses. It has exceeded that. And I think that the proposed budget as passed by the House does not contemplate an increase in fees. It does contemplate an increase in appropriations to really meet the needs of the agency and to decrease it so that we're not lapsing a disproportionate amount to the general fund.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, you as well.
Thank you.
I don't want to skip that.
ask her if she wants to do it. Her name is Haley. Haley Penny. You want me to bring her in? Yeah.
Why don't you bring her in and ask if the commissioner plans on being on?
I'll just have to press the unmute everything else. Have to unmute myself.
I'll have to ask if you want. Good afternoon. Hallie, I just had a question on the Department of Business and Economic Affairs. Is Commissioner Caswell planning on joining the presentation, or will you be the only one?
Oh, no, is he not being showing right now?
We can't see him on there.
All right, let me go look for him.
Thank you.
He's on his way.
Thank you. Okay. There we go.
There we go. Can you see me?
Yeah. Good afternoon. Our next presentation will be with the Department of Business and Economic Affairs, and we'll recognize Commissioner Caswell. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Senator. Happy to be here. I'm going to try to share my screen if that's all right. Can you see that?
We can.
Okay, very good. I just put it here, make it bigger. Still good? Great. So thank you. I'll just run through a couple of quick slides for you, senators. We don't have a ton of stuff, but I'd like to get to a couple of key points as we get to the end, and of course, take any questions or discuss anything you'd like to discuss under our budget for this year. So this is our mission statement under BEA. Very simple: steward New Hampshire's economy and quality of life. That speaks to our tourism and economic development functions. So a couple of core functions that we continue to operate under here. Business recruitment and expansion is a lot of the activity that we have on a day-to-day basis. We've seen that continue throughout the pandemic and continue at a pretty brisk pace. I would say really without much stop, except for about maybe through March and April of last year. Under the business support function, this is another critical component of what we do here under our Division of Economic Development. We work with businesses collaboratively with stakeholders around the state, with other state agencies, with the community college system, university system, and others to meet the needs of the business community around the state. In fact, we're engaged in a new strategic development called our Economic Recovery and Expansion Strategy, which really is aimed at buttressing a lot of the support that we do around the state. And again, formalizing relationships that we have with stakeholders all across New Hampshire. Under the workforce development and recruitment, this is the top issue for almost every employer in the state currently. We have operations through our Office of Workforce Opportunity, in addition to the regular operations we have through our Division of Economic Development. And increasingly, what we find ourselves doing is using a lot of the recruitment, marketing, and promotion functions that we have here within DEA to aim at workforce recruitment and finding ways post-COVID to find opportunities for people to find that glorious life that we have here in New Hampshire, be able to accommodate that in a wide variety of different communities around the state, in close cooperation again with our business community. We handle the state's international relations. That's been kind of a quiet front for us for the last year, but we are starting to see things kick back up. We've got USMCA now with Canada fully operational. We're looking forward to having tourism join back to that category as the border opens, hopefully later this year. We've just recently had meetings, for instance, with the United Kingdom new Consul General and with the incoming CG for Canada. So we have an operation through our Office of International Commerce that does a lot of work with businesses hoping to be able to get into the export market. But at the same time, we do develop and are focused on improving the relations of New Hampshire with key trading partners, including primarily Europe and Canada at this point. Tourism marketing and promotion is a major function and probably where we spend the most of our amount of our money. This is a function that becomes even more important as we begin to come out of the pandemic. The tourism industry is going to be highly competitive as people are vaccinated and are looking to get out and travel again after being in their homes for the last year. We are already starting to see the activity notch up across the state. And we are doing our best working again with the industry and with our partners in developing very significant outreach strategies, marketing, advertising in key markets across the United States, primarily in the Northeast. And then finally, of course, we manage under an MOU with the Department of Transportation, the 12 state welcome centers. And we staff those with personnel. They're trained by Granite State ambassadors as be able to provide customer service to people who are stopping in our welcome centers. Here's a quick layout of our staff. We have 71 full-time staff broken out into these four major categories. BVS, our Bureau of Visitor Services, heavy staff involvement there just because of the number of centers that we have and the hours that they're open, the days that they're open. Division of Economic Development is 28. Travel Tourism has a total of 9 staff. A lot of the work under Travel Tourism is done through contracts with ad agencies and other partners. And then our finance and operations function. Highlights of our budget this year really are, we've taken some pretty noteworthy reductions, 17%, as I recall, of our original budget, 17% reduction in general fund expenditures. We are anticipating under HB2 the addition of the state planning office that would come to us from the Office of Strategic Initiatives as part of the Department of Energy establishment. That's a function of, I believe, 8 people that would be coming to the department. That's a new addition, but a very welcome one, and I think one that fits very nicely into the work that we're doing. Obviously, planning and SEDS programs and all of the work that goes into what the regional planning commissions and the state office of planning do, I think have a direct correlation with economic development. And of course, the marketing funding is the highlight of our budget every year, and it continues to be this year. A couple of visuals for you here. We have the total amount of where we're spending the money. As I mentioned there, the big orange piece is our marketing budget. Salaries and benefits make up, about the other half of our budget. That's where we get our resources. We're funded 40% by federal budget, and the remaining 55 here. Very small sliver there, 4% for turnpike funding, and that's for the welcome centers. And then just to give you an idea by division, about half of our operation is economic development, which includes the Office of Workforce Opportunity, which administers the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act programs, the WIOA programs for the state through that operation. And that's included in that number. So getting to HB2, a couple of provisions here, a couple I would like to highlight for you. First is a change that was made in the House under Section 52 and 53. This is the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs position that I really have a high priority on. This is a position that's going to increasingly be important for us as we continue to expand our work with municipalities, with the counties, with other segments of government on all of the issues that I mentioned earlier, everything from international relations to tourism promotion and obviously workforce and business recruitment. Under the House-passed version, they extended that, they pushed out the period of time that it would take for me to be able to bring that person on until 2023. I do think that, and I would like to just point out that that's going to make things a little bit difficult for the implementation of our program. That's a position that we had open and I was holding open. It's not currently held by any single individual. The individual left here, I would say about 6 months ago. And my intention was to convert that position into an unclassified Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for those reasons. I would also point out, I think the others are pretty self-explanatory. I mentioned the shift under 188 and 89 of the Office of Planning and Development that would come to BEA. And I think those are the major points I wanted to raise there. Certainly happy to come back to these, Senator. Here are the budget requests that we've got outstanding. Again, I would say that there's 2 items here that are relevant to the relocation of that Office of State Planning to BEA. You'll see those sort of down here at the bottom. With the lease costs, because we'll have to have some additional space for those staff members, as well as some of the actual costs of moving them over from where they're currently located to our office here on Main Street. Up at the top, there is a salary and benefit, it's one line for each, salaries and benefits for an additional, administrative and accounting staff here, given that we are going to be taking on, I believe, an additional 8 staff members, plus the functions that come with that. Our current administrative staff, I do think, would be stretched to be able to accommodate that. So we've included that there. Also, I'll point out here the Sbdc budget. You'll recall that the governor did send a letter back in March earlier this year as a result of the change in the revenue numbers with additional prioritized needs. Included in that was raising the Sbdc budget under our departmental budget up to, I believe it's $315,000 for each year. This additional request of $90,000 adds to what the House had included in their House-passed budget. So that would get them to the I think it's 315. Correct me if I'm wrong, Hallie, on that particular line item. And the same with the 2 promotional marketing lines. This would bring those funding levels up to what the governor had requested in that March 4th additional prioritized need request. So I have all these totals here, but those are the additional requests that we have made. And I think that's pretty much my presentation. I'm happy to talk about any of those items, Senator.
Thank you, Chairman Daniels, and thank you, Commissioner. I have a question on page 673 of the compare budget, dealing with safety rest areas and highways. There's a little bit of a drop from your fiscal year 21 authorized to your fiscal year 22. Are you going to be able to properly staff the safety rest areas with the 2 drops in personnel, both the temp and class 10?
That will be a challenge with that number there. I mean, we're right now anticipating operating the rest areas at 5 days per week. We're operating them basically Thursday through Monday each week, with Tuesday and Wednesday they're not being staffed. That doesn't mean that the rest areas aren't available. It just means that we've had to make some. That's where we've been anticipating making those savings up. Part of the other difficulty, Senator, with this is that given the pay scale and given the type of job that this entails, it has been quite difficult to find people to staff the welcome centers. I think what we see, up in Littleton and in some of the other areas, is a little different than some of the experiences of our staff in Salem and Seabrook and some of the other areas. And so it is challenging.
Thank you.
To find those individuals.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Taylor, good to see you, Commissioner. Is it possible that you could instruct the staff that you have at those rest areas that are operating to count the census of people that actually use them? I think that'd be very helpful.
I can get that information to you to see sort of how that goes by rest area. We have foot traffic counts.
Okay.
For all those.
And that foot traffic would be the folks that actually go into the area. It would include people at drive-throughs when they stop, get out, ask questions, pick up maps, that kind of thing. When you say foot traffic, that would incorporate people who stop along the highways.
Yeah, at the 12, there are 12 rest areas that we manage, and that would be all of them. But the foot traffic numbers of people that would come in the door.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Further questions? Commissioner, I do have a question regarding SBDC. My understanding was that last year there was 315,000 appropriated for that, but that only 160,000 was spent, or 160,000 remains, but it wasn't all spent.
Yeah, no, we've worked that out with UNH, and I might ask Hallie to jump in on this because she was the one that was dealing with that. That's all been. Hallie, why don't you just explain that? You can explain it better than I can.
Sure. 166K represents what was actually paid out that year. I think there were some issues with invoices and a lot more were paid in FY21. We were invoiced for much more than that. How's that we were invoiced for about 375K, but it wasn't all paid in FY20s. A lot of it was paid in FY21.
Okay, thank you. Further questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Commissioner Caswell. I'm just wondering if sort of along the same lines with the Small Business Development Center, if any of the federal funds that the state's expecting to receive from the Rescue Act, whether your agency would be recommending that any of those funds be directed to the SBDC.
Well, those funds, as you know, Senator, as they come in, are going to probably drop into various different agencies. And I think that there's going to also be some legislative involvement in some of the deployment of those resources. I don't know that I could say that we're going to have funding that would be available to get from the federal government to match federal programs. If that were the case, I think we would be happy to explore that. But my understanding is that we would probably still need to have some match funding in our budget in order to keep the program running through general funds.
Thank you.
Commissioner, as you work with businesses to get going again, what do you find is necessary to be done to get the economy going again?
Well, I mean, the economy for the most part is actually going really, really fast. I mean, we've got a very low unemployment rate. We've got a redeveloped workforce access problem. I mean, for a lot of industries, particularly in the hospitality space. I would say that as we see the economy start to come back online and we look to what I anticipate to be a pretty busy summer, particularly for that industry within our tourism industry, which, as you know, is critical to our overall state economy. The access to workforce is going to continue to be one of the major obstacles that we have. I would say, in addition to that, the ongoing need to continue to recruit workforce to meet the employer needs across the state is also going to impact the housing market, as it has already begun to do. We see housing prices really going up pretty quickly, making a lot of cases a difficult decision, more difficult for some people to relocate to New Hampshire. So those are two areas that I would say go more or less hand in hand, but I think represent what we're hearing most from businesses right now.
Thank you. Further question, the task force on licensing that existed, at least I know a couple of years ago, is that still active?
It has not been active, Senator. We haven't. I mean, through COVID, I think we unfortunately had to drop some of those things, and I don't recall the last time we met, but it was some time ago.
Okay. And the travel and tourism budget, have they been able to spend all of the appropriation in spite of COVID?
Yes, we've been moving ahead on that. I think there might be some in one of the funds that does not lapse that will carry over, but we intend on using that for this summer where we didn't use it last summer. I would also point out, Senator, that under the normal conditions, our budget is tagged to the M&R revenue, and our percentage of that normally is assigned to the department is 3.15% of those revenues. The number that I mentioned that was in my request there, which is a total of for FY22 would be a total of $9,521,288. That represents just short of that 3.15 statutory requirement that we go by to make that budget and to make that initially part of our overall presentation. So I do think that to reiterate what I said earlier, I do think that given the state of the industry, this is a particularly important year to be looking at those numbers and how we promote the state and how we can continue to help that industry recover from what was a pretty abysmal 2020.
Thank you. Any further questions? Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, there are a plethora of worker retraining programs in different departments. Do you interface with either your workforce development and recruitment or business recruitment and expansion with any of those training programs? And if so, are any of them under your purview? And if not, how do you interact with those that are not? Okay.
Thanks, Senator. We operate under the WIOA program. So all the displaced worker programs, all the youth programs that work with local stakeholders around the state for younger people who are either in high school or dropped out of high school to get them reconnected into the system. We fund the New Hampshire Works programs and function with the Department of Employment Security. So any of the programs that fall under those categories, that includes also a rapid response program. So when businesses are laying off individuals, we have a team where we work with, again, with employment security to go out and help those businesses and the employees find new work quickly. And we have, that's a very cooperative relationship that we have with them. There are a lot of other programs, as you well know, around the state. There's apprenticeship programs the community college system runs, and so on. We do interface with those, but we don't control any of those other programs at this point, just the stuff that falls under the WIOA funding.
Thank you.
Any further questions? And probably along the same line, a couple of years ago, there was a study committee which I know that you had participated in, where we identified 130 job training programs. What is being done to consolidate those that have duplicative training purposes and or to align to the needs of those businesses that need workers now?
Yeah, Senator, that's a very good point, and I agree. There are a lot of programs out there, and some of them are in fact duplicative. I would say that for what this department has been able to do is to focus on what are the programs that we are able to deliver and we are responsible for, and to make those work in the best possible way that we can. Some of the ways that we've done that this past year, we consolidated a number of contracts that were external to BEA and brought them in-house in order to save costs, in order to make them work better together, in order to reduce the duplication that you mentioned, and to have those programs made available effectively for the people that need them. I don't, unfortunately, have the purview to get too far out beyond the bounds of our own department right now, but I do think that over time, I would hope that we would be able to displace some of those programs that are no longer necessary. And if there is a role for us to be able to play there in helping that happen, I'm certainly welcome to take that on.
Thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Have a
Thank
good
you, Senator.
afternoon.
You too.
Next, we have the Department of Information Technology.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
I would like to request that two other people be invited to join. That would be Deputy Commissioner Ken Dunn and our Finance Director Rose Curry, who are in the session as well right now.
They've got their hand up. Okay, I think we have everyone in. Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Dennis Goulet. I'm the Commissioner for the Department of Information Technology. And with me today is Deputy Commissioner Ken Dunn and our Finance Director Rose Curry. And with your permission, I will ask Ken to share our presentation.
Sure. Anytime you're ready, Ken.
All right, we have a pretty large presentation. I'm going to go through it quickly. Feel free to stop me if I'm moving too fast and ask questions, or hopefully we'll have some time at the end as well. I won't go through all of the text. It's there for your edification if you wish to read it, and I believe you already have the presentation. My main point here is that Information Technology Executive Branch in New Hampshire is a centralized organization authorized under 21R, and it has been for over a decade, which is a little unique among states. There's very few that have been centralized that long. One point that we've observed on a national basis is that those states that were centralized from an IT perspective had a lot easier time and a better go at it during COVID, and we'll talk about that some more as we go along. Next page, please. Couple major things here on this slide. Our strategic plan, one of the pillars on it is enterprise alignment or enterprise partnership, and really what that meant was trying to build out more common apps for our agencies as appropriate versus having similar applications purchased and maintained multiple times. That effort really served us well in COVID in a couple areas. One being our websites where we had, implemented a new platform, and we were able to leverage it for many of the response and recovery activities that we did during COVID. The other area that was pretty large was in our case management area, where we were able to implement new features pretty quickly for COVID response and recovery in the areas of contact tracing and vaccination and grants management for the Gopher folks. Additionally, the fact that we were centralized did allow us to pivot and expand our network very rapidly in early days of COVID, because we really did have one set of infrastructure versus, I'm aware of other states that had, more than 20 separate infrastructures they had to scale, which was very difficult for them. The cybersecurity area is important to note. A couple of key points there. First, the goal line keeps moving for us. Protecting citizen data, which used to be the primary focus for cybersecurity, is still, of course, a big focus. But now we have to worry about ransomware. And that is, that not only does that create data vulnerabilities, but it actually can, stop the operation of the state if we're not, if we're caught. So we're trying to be really careful there. And one of the ways we are is by having an outside, the legislature funded in the last biennium budget a comprehensive cyber risk assessment, which we did conduct during this biennium. And we have a set of activities that we've already completed, as well as other ones we're working on, based on the findings of that. Those said findings, we're not making them public, but we could convene a non-meeting for any interested folks in the legislature to see what we did learn. One very public thing that came up in that was we did end up shutting down some of the environmental services public-facing functions for a period of time because we found some serious vulnerabilities there. That was impactful to DES's customer base, and we felt real bad about it. We also felt responsibility to protect that data. Next page, please, Ken. I'm going to take you from kind of high-level summary into the details of the budget as we go. This is the highest level in an accounting unit level. We have the direct agency budgets. That's really the budgets that are focused just on the agency stuff. So basically, we work with each agency to set up their direct budgets. And again, their direct budgets are part of their overall budgets. And generally, we go with agency guidance on investments there, as long as they're within the standards for DOIT. So you can see an increase there from 21 adjusted authorized into 22, 23, and agencies were able to do that while still making their budget targets. I will call out you can see a fairly large delta between the 20 actuals and the 21 adjusted authorized. That really is kind of primarily front end and back end. On the front end, we had the continuing resolution, which slowed us from moving forward on some of the initiatives in the 20 budget. And then at the end of it, we were being very austere. At the end of 20, appropriately so due to COVID. So, and some of the expenditures we did do in COVID were covered by CARES Act, so we really didn't need operating expenditures there. I have much more detail to support that, but I don't know that we have time to go through it here. Looking at centralized services, you can see that we, for 21, we had a modest, almost flat from 20. And then going into the planned budget for 22 and 23, you see a fairly large increase. I'll take you through that in detail. It's driven primarily by two things, and we'll take you through that as we get into the detail there. But we actually did cut a lot of stuff in the central services, but we had a couple of items that really pushed us way up. IT salaries and benefits looks pretty flat, and that was accomplished by unfunding a bunch of positions. And again, I'll take you through the detail on that. Statewide telecom, which is our dedicated or revolving fund, a modest increase there, and I'll take you through the rate card later. Our billing rate card is flat on the major things that we bill agencies for. So from an agency perspective, it's all good news. And I have some key summary points there that I'm not going to go into in detail, but except for the second bullet in the first major bullet, FY22, and that is the two things that drove our shared budget up. The 2.8 million on Microsoft 0365, which we implemented for year one using CARES Act money. Now that's hitting operating expense in years 2 and 3. And that's basically moving email and collaboration and the Office features into the cloud, which the other branches of government have already done. So we're a little bit behind the other branches of government in New Hampshire on that one. And then the other major one was the Salesforce licenses, which we used heavily for a number of things in Health and Human Services, and we'll take you through a little more detail on that. So next slide, please, Ken. This is really just by class line, and I'm not going to spend any time here except to point out that you can see where the major, our major delta going from 21 to 22 and 23 really is in that software area. It's class 38. Just that's there for your edification. A lot of things either stayed flat or went down otherwise. Next slide, please. Here's some important details associated with budget documents. The first, HB1, really talks to the cyber insurance. The cyber insurance is something that I actually requested, DOIT requested several years ago. It became a best practice to do that. And we had decided at the time that that since there's a risk management capability inside administrative services, that this function should be in administrative services. And so the challenge that entailed was that they were using all general funds to fund this. So working with Division I Finance, we thought that moving it to DOIT and billing it out would reduce general fund impact on that line item. So that was really what was driving it. And I will have when we get further on in the presentation, I have a request to change one thing in this, but another thing I want to note, and we'll talk about this in another part of the presentation, is that was the amount we had been spending. Unfortunately, that line item goes up pretty steeply every year, and administrative services is now working on what the next couple of years are going to be, and there's another steep increase. So we'll talk about that a bit more later on in the presentation. But the next line in that under HB1 is 10, the Department of Information Technology Appropriation. We unfunded 18 shared positions to make the governor's budget. The House put back 4, and that's what that number is there. Moving down to House Bill 2 language, we requested this 121, and the way we were to cut salaries and benefits to make the governor's budget was to really focus on what I call opportunistic unfunding. That is, what's open or coming open, and unfund that. That wasn't a strategically good decision, but it was a way to get to where we needed to get quickly. A strategic decision, of course, would have said, okay, how do we, what positions do we really need and what do we need less and more, and that kind of. So we asked for this language so that during the biennium, given that we had unfunded in shared services, we could adjust along the way to a more strategically appropriate situation from a staffing perspective.
Commissioner, can you please suspend for a moment, Senator Hennessy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner. I have a question for the positions that you unfunded for the governor's budget. How many of those are currently occupied? Or are they all vacant right now?
The 4, which is what the House put back.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Please continue.
Okay, thank you. So I'm moving on now to House Bill 2, 341. Position established. That would be in the Department of Agriculture as part of the Animal Records Database legislation. So we had created a fiscal note. Agriculture really doesn't have any large enterprise systems, and they have 1/20th of one person, one FTE that supports their application. So they have almost nothing, almost no one supporting them. So trying to bring up a large application like that just wasn't going to work with that staffing level. So in the fiscal note, we added a position, an IT manager 3. And this isn't a manager that sits, we don't envision this as a manager that sits behind a desk. It's really somebody that's going to roll their sleeves up, help the agriculture implement and support that system as we go forward. Next page, please. All right. So here's some requested adjustments that we would like to make from House passed budget to moving forward. The first is really is what I was talking about before. It's the anticipated estimated rate increase in cyber insurance. And I say it that I qualified in that way because the cyber insurance companies don't give you rates till the last minute because there's no actuarial consistency in cyber security insurance right now. And they're all running scared because of the large and impactful cyber events that did occur this year and the year before. So we're expecting pretty large increases. And so we want to accommodate that in the budget. I will also say that we've begun talking administrative services, and we're going to vet this out pretty carefully about canceling our cyber insurance because it keeps getting more and more expensive. The deductible keeps going way up and the overall coverage keeps going down. So the value proposition has diminished a lot since we first purchased it 5 years ago. The second piece is just removing accounting units associated with the creation of Department of Energy. So this is more housekeeping type stuff. And then if you look down in the possible adjustments for 22-23 DOIT, without specifics, we have Department of Energy. So we know that Diane Martin's going to be bringing in a budget that will have some class 27 stuff in. We will need to reflect identically what, in detail, what Diane Martin has in summary for Department of Energy. And then we're aware that Division 1 Finance was doing some work with the Adult Parole Board. It's small numbers, but there may be some adjustments there that are required to make sure that the DOIT budget for corrections actually matches what corrections has in their budget. And the other adjustment I would request would be to strike the last sentence of the HB 1A, page 719, item down at the bottom of page 6. It's an automatic trigger to reduce our budget if the general fund's impact goes over what it was when GAS was funding it. I think that should go. It doesn't apply right now in the sense that our general fund impact will be lower, but that would require us to track, where we were at essentially forever. And I think it's we have to make a decision as to whether we buy cyber insurance or we don't buy cyber insurance and then fund it. And that, to me, isn't helpful in the solution of that. So I would ask that last sentence be stricken. Now we'll move on to page 7, please. So here we are at the direct agency budget, and I'll again state that direct is what is spent specifically for that agency. So an example would be, if you took the Division of Motor Vehicles driver license system, for example, that is a direct expense in the Department of Safety. So that's an example. So it's very much, and this is things, not people. So it's software, hardware, and professional services that are specific to that agency. Next item, next page, please, Ken. This gives you some, you saw some increases there. This details out where the increases came from. And, we have them in pretty excruciating detail in terms of where they came from, but you can see in administrative services, the major impact there was the expansion of New Hampshire First continues to be used. Our statewide ERP system continues to be used more deeply in the state, and it's driven costs to support it. In the Office for Professional Licensure and Certification, Director Courtney has, is moving to expand services and improve their citizen service efforts, as well as address some compliance issues that the AG's office had identified that relates to the boards and commissions using personal email for state business. So fixing that actually costs some money because we had to buy licenses. Department of Safety has a bunch of different systems, new systems that are coming online, a new computer-aided dispatch and records management system, body cam, and then the vision system work for DMV, for the driver's license system. Department of Labor has a new system coming on to modernize their 30-plus-year-old infrastructure, application infrastructure. Employment security, job match, they continue to find, particularly in this environment, that, as I heard Commissioner Caswell speaking earlier, this really targets that space is trying to find, get people into the jobs that are out there. And then Liquor Commission has some additional requirements as it relates to the implementation of their new point of sale and financial systems. We can go to the next page, please. Now we're looking at our DOIT central services, shared services. This is things that everybody uses. So it's a relatively small piece of our entire budget, but super important. So an example there would be email and office licenses, for example. Everybody uses that. And so the way we account for this is we allocate it out in a way that makes sense. So our largest allocation method is PC count. So if you have a PC, it's driving a certain amount of cost. And so total number of PCs in the agencies multiplied by the cost per PC ends up, that's the amount. So my salary, for example, gets billed out by PC count. The large increase in 22-23 is driven by a couple different things. And I believe we have some details on the next slide on that. Yes. So here's our class line breakdown. And again, you can see in class 38, that large increase on the software. And it's really two things. For the most part, it's the Microsoft Office 365 licensing, which we talked about before. That's your email and calendar and Microsoft Teams, as well as the Office. Now, this represents a shift to an operating expense model from a capital model that we've been operating under in the past. So in the past, couple biennia, you hadn't really seen much investment there because we had been running the same systems. But we would have had a pretty large investment this biennium in modernization if we continue to do that. So this will then be a consistent expense over time versus a bumpy one where every 4 or 5 or 6 years we have a very large capital expenditure or a large extra operating expense. So that's Office 365. The other large increase is the Salesforce.com. Now, what is that used for? Well, Salesforce is the platform that the vaccination system is running on now, the VINI system, for example. Salesforce is the platform that the Governor's Citizen Services Office uses to engage with, to track their interactions with citizens. And and Gopher used for grant management during the CARES Act distribution. So it's one of the enterprise systems that we had begun to put in place before COVID. And we're very thankful we had it because it did allow us to scale and pivot really fast to deliver the services that we needed to deliver using CARES Act money to fund it. But now we're moving in out of the realm of CARES Act. 98.5. So this is in shared because the multiple agencies use it, but the vast majority of all of that is really HHS. So it's a little bit skews the shared budget a bit there because the other entities that use this application are much, much smaller than Health and Human Services. Next slide, please. This is an overall org chart of the Department of Information Technology, and it shows you where the unfunded positions sat. You can kind of see where the unfunded positions. So a total of 31 positions were unfunded for 22-23. Some of those were in the agencies, and I look at that as an agency decision. In other words, if the agency says I want to invest less in IT staffing or in IT applications, we feel like it's their decision. We collaborate with them on that decision. And then there were the 18 originally unfunded in the governor's office, of which there are now 14 unfunded and shared. And so that really shows you the overall DOIT org chart. So let's move on to the next slide, please. Here's our salaries and benefits situation. And again, it looks pretty flat because of the unfunding of positions. I think that's the net of it. And I don't know that we need to go in there much more other than you can see what the different boxes on the org chart are doing there. Let's move on to the next slide, please. All right, this one of the things we like to look at is, and I've typically done this in my career, is look at, how are we balanced with respect to management and the remainder of the organization to make sure that we're not top heavy, we have the right level of, the right quantity of management. So you can see that 57% of all of our salaries and the equivalent percent of benefits is going in the classified area, which is, the non-executive area of DOIT. So it's really, what that tells me, and I hope you, is that we're not top heavy. We're fairly well balanced between the folks that are out there getting the job every day and then the folks that are managing the department itself. The text below is just a reiteration of what you had seen before. But at this time, I would like to mention that we would request that in the Senate phase, we'd like to ask that the other shared unfunded positions be funded if possible. The shared positions are the ones that run everything for the state, and cutting, that number of positions being cut really cuts us close to the bone. And if the revenues are there and you feel the revenues are there, we would like to request that those other 14 positions, or 13 of the 14 positions, plus a couple other items that we removed from the budget, be placed back into the budget for 22-23. The financial impact of that would be, I'm looking that up right now. I'm sorry, I had it just a minute ago. So the financial impact of that would be in fiscal 22, $1.3 million total and 512,000 general fund. In fiscal 23, the impact of that would be 1.6 million total, 651,000 general fund. And now moving on to the next slide, please. This is our telecommunications. Again, it went up a little due to some investments that we're required to make. But one of the things we do with the revolving fund is we try to be careful that we're collecting about the same amount as we're going to need to spend. So if we look at the next page, which is the rate card that we bill out on, you can see that the things that we do most, which includes the VoIP phones, the voice over IP phones, and the data remains flat. We're holding the line on those costs. The big increase you can see is for the non-VoIP, which are the old-fashioned phone lines, which the support of which has gone up a lot. So we're billing, we're essentially charging what it costs. And we have a vast majority of all the lines in the state switched over to VoIP. So even though there's a billing increase there, it actually has a very little financial impact on the entire, on what agencies are paying. And we continue to move agencies over that have the older technology to the newer VoIP technology. Now, we slowed that way down during COVID because that team was also the team that stands up call centers. So we've been standing up and modifying call centers pretty continuously for over a year. That's slowing down a bit now as the vaccination effort is moving along and about to shift back into the healthcare sector, so we can get back to that. Additionally, with the implementation of the Microsoft technology Teams and Office 365, we'll be working to reduce the number of phones we buy as well. You can see that the phones are kind of expensive. Even a basic phone is almost $200 each, and a conference phone is $1,000. And really, we anticipate over time to reduce the purchase of phones down to almost nothing using more modern technology. The remainder of this presentation is just there for your edification. It's linking back to the actual language of that was passed by the House. So I won't go through any of that. And this concludes my formal testimony, and we'll now open up to questions. Senate, I don't know if anybody's talking, but we're not hearing anything. I don't know if there's any questions.
Yep, sorry, that was my fault. I didn't see anyone with questions. Actually, I did have one, because I think it was on the org chart. You mentioned that you had 31 unfunded positions, but on the next page, you talked about 30 unfunded positions.
Oh,
On
sorry.
page 11 and 12.
Oh, sorry. Sorry for confusing. So there were 31 total unfunded positions. Some of those were shared positions. Some of those were direct positions. The direct positions were really determined by the agencies. So, we don't push those one way or the other. That's really an agency decision. For the shared ones, we unfunded originally in the governor's budget 18 positions. The House put back 4, which were the 4 that had people already in them, and there are 14 remaining, 13 of which we would request. We're requesting that the Senate put back into the budget, and we can give you exact numbers on what the cost would be for that request.
Thank you. Seeing any further questions from the committee? I don't, let's see. Yes, Mr. Dunn?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a clarification on that 30 versus 31. There are 31 total unfunded. We have 30 of those are actually in our IT salary and benefits, our 7708 accounting unit. One is in telecom. So that's where the delta is.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you all.
See, at this time, the committee will be in recess until 3:15. If the committee would please come back to order. Our next presentation is with the New Hampshire Commission on Human Rights. And I would invite the executive director to join us and announce who you are and give us your presentation.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Senator Daniels, and to the rest of the committee. Before I start, I would like to request if Kathy Carr from the Department of Justice could be included in this as well. As you may or may not know, the Department of Justice provides administrative services for us. We are administratively attached. And if there are questions that I'm not able to answer, Kathy is amazing and she would be able to help.
Okay, 1 second. No, I do not see her, but
Okay, well, we can start and if
the Attorney General has his hand raised.
okay, so then that would be her. She would be in maybe as the Attorney General versus her personal name.
There you go.
There we go.
It is Kathy. Okay, good
Yes.
afternoon. Okay, please proceed.
Excellent. Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Ani Malachi. I am the Executive Director for the New Hampshire Commission on Human Rights, or for Human Rights. I'm not sure where I am today. Thank you. I'd like to share my screen. I have a handful of PowerPoint slides. I believe they were made available to the committee, but I'd like to be able to go through these very quickly on screen if I can.
Yes, please, please.
Thank you. Okay, and I'm hoping, let's see. Are you all able to see the screen share?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. And let's do a full screen. There we go. Fantastic. Okay, so thank you all very much for this opportunity. I just very briefly, I would like to share who we are as a state agency. The Human Rights Commission was established in 1965 by RSA 354A, and our purpose is the elimination of discrimination across the state. And our jurisdictional areas are employment, housing, public accommodation, and as of 2019, education has been included in our statute. The commission is comprised of 7 volunteer commissioners who provide investigative oversight, and they make decisions on charges of discrimination. Each commissioner is appointed by the governor with the consent of the executive council for a term of 5 years. The commission has the power to receive, investigate, and pass upon complaints of illegal discrimination, and to engage in research, education, and community outreach designed to prevent said discrimination. In addition, the authority vested in the commission by RSA 354 to enforce New Hampshire's laws against discrimination. The commission also has a work share agreement with our federal partners, the EEOC, also known as the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and we work with them to enforce the federal laws prohibiting discrimination in employment as well. Just a brief look at our organizational chart here. When we move down to the third tier, so under the executive director, there's an assistant director and an administrative assistant. And I apologize, this one is the older organizational chart, but the administrative assistant position, although we have that in our organization currently, it is unfunded. And we have a secretary, a part-time secretary that is basically our receptionist. Under the assistant director, you'll notice the staff that we have, 5 full-time investigators. We have now a new intake unit, and we have 1 full-time intake individual. We have a part-time assigned to us. However, that position is unfunded, and we currently have, new to the agency, a part-time paralegal for additional legal support. So there's this particular chart just goes over some of our numbers, and it looks at the amount of cases filed that we've had in fiscal year, this is federal fiscal year 2020, and it shows at the top that we had a federal contract of 170 cases, and we certainly fulfill our contract with the federal government, and there are some cases that come to us, or some charges that come to us that are state only. We certainly continue to proceed with investigating and bringing to conclusion any and all charges that we have jurisdiction over. And as far as our budget goes, 15% of our funding comes from the federal government, and we have 1 contract, which is with the EEOC, and that contract is based on the number of cases that we are awarded each year, and we are reimbursed on a voucher basis. And moving on to the very last slide. So thank you all for bearing with me on this. So for the 2022-2023 fiscal year, it shows here what our prioritized needs are. And really, it is important to have the administrative assistant position, have the funding replaced for that position, as well as the part-time intake coordinator. With the unfunding of the administrative assistant position, the duties of that job of that position have been spread out across the agency, primarily falling on my shoulders to make sure that supplies are ordered and human resources information is disseminated amongst the organization. And the investigators do take a day in the office to do some administrative tasks as well, that are outside of their investigatory work. Having the part-time intake coordinator would allow us to have our intake department fully staffed, and with that staffing, allowing us to reprioritize and create more efficiencies in our intake process. So I thank you all, and that is it, and I will stop sharing my screen. And so if there are any questions, I am happy to take those.
Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Director. Nice to see you. I just have one question. Of the 2 positions that you're asking to be funded, are these positions that you currently have filled or that were recently filled?
So thank you very much for the question, Senator Hennessy. Both of these positions are vacant. Once they became vacant, there was a freeze, so we were not able to fill them. And so they are empty at this point. We do have them assigned to us, so it's not a new position that's being created. These are positions that are presently in our organizational chart. What I'm requesting at this time is if there could please be the money put back to reinstate and to allow us to fill those positions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Just a question. What does the intake part of the organization do?
Thank you very much for the question, Senator Daniels. That is the first line. So when a caller calls in and they may think they have a charge, they have questions about what jurisdiction, we might have information on what our process is. That is the first person they talk to. And so during that initial interview, and not too detailed, but just enough to understand what is the nature of the call, then that individual or the department is responsible for making sure that there's the questionnaire is submitted, and then they would be the ones to move forward with the actual filing and docketing of the formalized charge of discrimination, beginning that process of notifying both parties in a particular case, as well as tracking the information. So whether it's statistical data, keeping up on information relative to the charges that we have that are waiting to be assigned, connecting with members of the public, meaning if I have a charge and I need some information or would like to send in more information, the intake coordinator would do that, as well as working with attorneys.
Okay, thank you. As I look at your organization chart, one of the things that seems to be missing on there that I saw in the things that you do is education. Because I would think probably that one of your goals would, in essence, try to put yourself out of a job so that there is no discrimination. So I don't see the educational part of your organization chart. So what is it and how do you go about that education with the organization that you have?
I appreciate that question very much. So the way it has been tackled in the past, the executive director and/or the assistant director have embarked on training ventures, meaning if someone calls in requesting training, the focus has primarily been in the area of sexual harassment. But when we do that training, we do make it a broad, it's a broader training. So we talk about the organization, what we do. We talk about a variety of kinds of harassment. And depending on if it's management or frontline, we will tailor the training. So historically, that is how it's been handled. Initially, when I first worked on putting this budget together, pre-COVID, of course, having a new position, having someone to be a full-time trainer to really create robust and interesting training, and then to be able to go out and provide training, to put together workshops, et cetera. That is something that is a priority for us. However, in light of where we are financially, at the very least, if we can get these two positions funded again, then that puts us at a pretty decent spot. And then if I have to, wait for the next biennium to request that brand new position, then so be it. It will fall on the executive director, myself, as well as the assistant director to continue to do training. However, it would be great to have someone that is their full-time job to understand what's the newest and best in training techniques, and to really go out and do workshops, et cetera. The last workshop that I put together for the organization statewide was in 2019. We plan to do it again in 2020, but obviously because of the pandemic, it was not possible.
Okay, thank you. Further questions from the committee? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Director. To follow up on Senator Hennessy's question, are those positions funded in the current budget but vacant and unfunded in the proposed next budget? Or were they unfunded in this budget?
Thank you, Senator Rosenwald, for the question. The position initially, the positions in the budget we are in right now, they were funded. However, for this current fiscal year, the positions were unfunded. And they have remained unfunded for the next biennium, which we're discussing right now.
Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, were they funded and filled, or were they funded and unfilled?
Thank you, Senator Gaida, for the question and for the clarification opportunity. So the positions were funded and have historically been filled. once the positions were unfilled, then they became unfunded. So I did not relieve people of positions. When the positions became, when people moved on from those positions, then the freeze, we were currently in the freeze, the hiring freeze, and then they remained unfilled. I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you very much.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I look at the numbers page, one after the organizational chart, I think I understand filed, closed, full credit, state only. So full credit, I would assume means federal and state, or I'm not familiar with the terminology.
Yes, and thank you for the follow-up. Yes, so a full credit case. So we also are paid by the EEOC for just doing an intake. So for us internally, that's the difference. There's a significant dollar difference, and we have a much smaller amount of intakes that we would be responsible for based on our contract. But full credit would be a case, a charge that is not an intake. So we've done our full investigatory work, and we have submitted that for credit towards the completion of our contract fiscal year.
Senator Rosenwald, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you are paid based upon intakes and completed cases in terms of with the federal government?
Correct.
Okay, and you are paid on what basis here in the state? In other words, I'm seeing different funding sources. I'm not certain. Again, I just want to clarify where's the money coming from? General fund?
Yes, Senator, just to further clarify. So of our 100% of the monies used to pay for everything, 15% of that comes from the federal government, which is strictly the EEOC, and we voucher for that money based on the cases closed within our contract given the fiscal federal year. The federal fiscal year. The balance of that, so that other 85%, we use general funds to do that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Director.
Senator
You're welcome.
Rosenwald.
Thank you. I'm still a little confused about the funding or unfunding of these positions during a biennium. What was the mechanism for removing the funding for one of the positions? Did you come to fiscal and ask to transfer that funding elsewhere? Or how was it unfunded during the biennium?
No, I did not, but maybe if Kathy Carr can use the right budget lingo, I'm not as nuanced as she is, so I'll turn it over to her for assistance.
Thank you.
So from what I understand, the positions are funded, they are just not filled and will not be filled through the biennium to meet closing targets.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much for your presentation, Ani.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Have a good
good
day.
afternoon. Thank you.
Our next presentation is with the Department of Justice.
Let's do it.
The chair recognizes our Attorney General, John Famella. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present today. Appreciate it. This is my first full day, second day on the job. So I'll just preface this presentation with saying if there are any questions I can't answer, or if Kathy can't answer, she's here with me in the room, we will get follow-up to you promptly. I believe you all received a copy of our presentation. Just want to check to see if you have the hard copy with you.
We do.
Okay, great. So I think many of you are familiar with the Department of Justice. I'm going to go to the second page of the presentation here that just kind of overviews the roles of the Attorney General. The Attorney General really has 5 jobs, and the Attorney General is supported in that role through the staff of the Department of Justice. The Attorney General serves as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for the state, the Chief Prosecutor, the Chief Legal Officer, the Protector of the Public, so there's a public protection role, and the Attorney General also serves as a Commissioner of the Department. So I think really the important pieces of this to focus on are the first 4: law enforcement, prosecution, Chief Legal Officer, and Protector of the Public. As the Chief Law Enforcement Officer, the Attorney General of the Department of Justice really oversees all law enforcement efforts in the state through the state's Department of Safety and also through local law enforcement agencies. As the Chief Prosecutor, the Attorney General's office and the Department of Justice supervises the state's county attorneys and who prosecute most crimes in the state. And the Attorney General's office takes on homicides and other cases of major public importance. One example being the criminal investigation related to the Youth Development Center from some just terrible events there that transpired in the 90s and the early 2000s. As Chief Legal Officer, the Department of Justice, the Attorney General represents state agencies in court, advises state agencies on legal issues, works to just help state agencies carry out their duties in compliance with the law. And the public protection role of the Attorney General's office is maybe the most important piece of it. Sort of everything the Attorney General's office does is sort of underlined by a public protection theme and role. But we exercise those duties through consumer protection, where we try to make sure consumers are that they're dealing with the business community fairly, through environmental protection, but then I think most prominently through the Criminal Justice Bureau. The department is broken up into 2 divisions. One is the Division of Public Protection, one is the Division of Legal Counsel. The Division of Public Protection kind of does what I just described, and the Division of Legal Counsel really focuses on the Attorney General's Chief Legal Officer duties. And that division also houses the Transportation and Construction Bureau, which represents the Department of Safety, among other agencies, and it houses the Civil Rights Unit and the Election Law Unit. That's just a little bit of an overview. I don't want to go into every detail, but I'll be happy to take questions. As you see here on the slide, there are a total of 157 authorized positions to carry out these various duties of the department. The next slide I'm going to is just slide 3 in the presentation. And this is just some select stats and numbers that shows you the activities that the department has undertaken and the duties that it's carried out over the last couple of years. The department has recovered about $8.3 million in general funds over the last 2 years through its various duties, primarily through consumer protection actions and multi-state settlements. The charitable trust unit has been very busy. We've registered over 11,000 charities in the past couple of years. The medical examiner's office has been incredibly busy as well, with over 1,000 autopsies performed. And our assistant deputy medical examiners have responded to over 8,000 unexpected deaths in the last 2 years. So a lot undertaken there. Consumer protection has been very, very busy, and we'll get to that sort of later in our presentation. But the consumer protection hotline, which is kind of the go-to resource for someone who may not have their own attorney or access to other legal help, they call us, and if they think that they're having an issue, if they're, they get something in the mail, they get something through email, they get a call, they buy a product and there's an issue with the product and it seems like there's something wrong, the consumer protection hotline is where they go. And we are here to answer those questions and try to point them in the right direction. And if necessary, take action if it seems as if someone is engaging in illegal or deceptive practices. Another important piece of the work the Department of Justice does is the department handles all criminal appeals. And so as you can see here, in the last couple of years, we've submitted 270 briefs to the state Supreme Court. This department is by far the biggest source of appeals submitted to the state Supreme Court. So in our law firm function, we have a really important appellate role. And then down here at the bottom on slide 3, just have a couple, a stat on our election law unit. And I'm going to address that later in the presentation, but the election law unit has been very busy, opened about 180 cases the past couple of years, been bringing forward prosecutions. We've, I think, secured 6 or 7 convictions, and we've got some pending trials in the pipeline. That unit has been busy, plays an important role. Enforcement is just one aspect of what that unit does, but I'll talk about that a little bit more in the presentation. And then the department manages a lot of grants, almost $45 million in grants that comes through our grants management unit. The next slide, slide 4. I think it's important to give the committee an overview of the role that the Department of Justice has played in the state's COVID response. As you can imagine, and I know you've read about, in addition to all the other challenges COVID-19 has presented the state, it's presented the state with sort of some unprecedented legal issues to wrestle with. So, with executive orders and emergency orders written and issued, this is a little outdated because it's as of November 2020, but I can tell you firsthand, given my role up until 2 days ago with the governor's office, that the Department of Justice played a key role in helping with the drafting of many of these orders. The department has dedicated thousands of hours of attorney and staff support to not only the governor's office, but all state agencies, as state government has carried out the COVID response. So these are just some numbers here that give you a sense of all the work the department has been doing with COVID. And like every agency, the issues that COVID has presented the department were issues that nobody could have anticipated. So this has been a lot of extra work that the department has taken on, but that's our job. That's the Department of Justice job when serious issues hit the state or a catastrophic situation confronts the state. The department many times is that backstop that has to step up and help agencies navigate through unprecedented times. So that is an overview of just some of the activities the department has been undertaking the past couple of years. The next slide, slide 5, just gives you an overview of what our budget looks like. This is based on the governor's budget that he submitted, but very little has changed in the House phase. So this is still fairly accurate. But we are not a majority general funded agency. Our budget is made up of about 32% general funds and 68% other funds. And even among the general funds that fund the Department of Justice, 20% of that is reimbursed through the statewide cost allocation plan. You see that mostly through the department's, the Division of Legal Counsel and the Civil Bureau. We expend funds on behalf of state agencies or to assist state agencies. And then those state agencies ultimately reimburse DAS because the money we've spent is really on their behalf. So while it's part of the Department of Justice budget, that it's money that is really spent on behalf of other agencies. And then out of other funds, much of that is through grants, and about 20% of that is through office functions, a big chunk of that being the Consumer Protection Bureau. Page 6 is really just a further breakdown of that. So I won't go into this pie chart, but this just sort of gives you it breaks down the general funds and the other funds. And I think what's helpful here is just seeing of the 68% the funding for the department that's not general funds. This gives you a sense of where that money comes from. I know we are not unique in that much of our budget depends on personnel. And so the next couple slides, I just wanted to give you an overview of what this budget has done when it comes to positions at the department. The proposed budget in the governor's budget for fiscal years 2022 and 2023 unfunded a total of 5 positions. That was done when we submitted this, that was done to meet our target. The next page, page 8, shows the new positions that were requested in the governor's budget. And in the budget you have before you that passed the House, all of these positions or new positions are in the budget currently. But we have 3 new attorneys in this budget. We have a new position for a director of diversity and community outreach, a new position, a new criminal justice investigator, and a new paralegal. The next slide, page 9, goes into a little more detail on what each of these positions are for. 3 of these positions, or I should say 4 of these positions, really flow or stem from the recommendations of the LEAC Commission. We have the first bullet point here under the LEAC section shows that the budget has a new attorney, a new investigator, and a new paralegal. These 3 positions are all for a new public integrity unit that the department is standing up as part of one of the recommendations of the LEAC Commission. The goal of the public integrity unit is to have a dedicated resource and function within the Department of Justice that can take action to hold public officials accountable when necessary. And this doesn't necessarily just mean law enforcement. You've all read the news reports of the YDC investigation. That involves actions in some instances by former state employees. And that's an example of the function of the public integrity unit. When there's a public official or a public employee who is engaged in conduct for which they need to be held accountable, the public integrity unit is meant to focus on those types of cases. And then the second bullet point here that's under the LEAC Commission recommendation is a director of diversity and community outreach. Senator Daniels, you asked Director Malachi in the last presentation, what are we doing as far as education goes when it comes to, issues related to discrimination or implicit bias or things like that. This position is meant to do kind of what you said, to try to, eventually the optimal situation would be to put ourselves out of business when it comes to enforcement on these issues. This position would be focused on, going out to county attorneys, city solicitor offices, all prosecutors in the state, and building bridges between prosecutors and the community. Because I think rather than focus on what we are doing wrong, it's better to focus on how we improve communication, improve education, and develop strategies, training to be better going forward. The next position, which is the second new attorney position that this budget funds, would be in the Consumer Protection Bureau. And this position would be intended to be dedicated to really the antitrust portion of the Consumer Protection and Antitrust Bureau. We're seeing a historically large number of hospital transactions that require complex antitrust review. I think this stems from a new era that we're in healthcare. We're seeing a lot of consolidation in healthcare. And so in the governor's budget, the department requested this new attorney position to focus on these types of transactions because they require a particular expertise. So if we get this position in this budget, we will recruit for someone with that type of background. And then the final attorney position, which the new attorney position in the budget, as you see down at the bottom section here, would be dedicated to civil litigation. A couple things I want to note. The House, the 2 real changes the House made to the Department of Justice's budget was to delay the funding for the Director of Diversity and Community Outreach until January 1, 2023, and to delay our new civil litigation attorney until July 1, 2022. So our request, and we're happy to answer questions on it, but one of our requests to this committee would be to restore the funding necessary to have those positions be effective or to be funded starting July 1 of 2021. And then the last page of the presentation here, and then I'll be happy to take any questions you have, deals with 3 new positions that we'd be requesting. This is the first time we've requested these positions comes in the Senate phase. And the reason for that, it really just stems from the transition that the department has undergone. Since I was confirmed 3 weeks ago, I've been talking to the team here and looking at the budget, and we understand the need to keep the budget tight, but I wanted to make sure that we at least presented to you any additional resource needs that we identified at the department. And these 3 positions are 3 needs we've identified. So as you can see here, 2 of these positions relate to the election law unit. We would request and propose that the Senate add funding for 1 new attorney in the election law unit and 1 new legal secretary. As part of this request, I think it's important to keep in mind what the Attorney General's role is when it comes to elections. Enforcement of the election laws is very important, and we've been busy on that front, but that's just one piece of what the election law unit is charged with. The election law unit is also charged with assisting local officials with questions regarding elections. As we all know, it's really local officials who are on the front lines of elections in this state, and they often come to the Department of Justice with questions about how they need to go about administering elections. It's important, I think, for the department to have this dedicated election law unit, but right now, the department only has 1 attorney and 1 investigator in that unit. So I think that if we could add 1 attorney and 1 legal secretary, we could enhance our service to the state in this area. And it would better enable us to enforce the state's election laws, but it would also better enable us to provide assistance to local officials and to the Secretary of State in administering elections. And then the last position that we would request is 1 additional attorney either in the Consumer Protection or Antitrust Bureau or in the Civil Litigation Bureau that could be dedicated to monitoring and participating in multi-state litigation on the consumer protection front. The pitch I would make for this position is that New Hampshire historically has not had the resources to participate in executive committees in multi-state litigation. And I'll explain what that means. When the state participates in one of these major cases that say 50 states come into in a consumer protection case, the states who are on the executive committee, many times it might be 10, 12 out of those 50, take on a little bit of more of a leadership role in those cases, but they also get a larger percentage of the ultimate recovery. That can be anywhere from $50,000 or so into the hundreds of thousands of dollars in an individual case. We're currently participating in 16 multi-state cases, and these are cases that every state signs on to. So these are not, states being overly aggressive and going after business. These are states participating in cases where it's crystal clear that something wrong has happened. But if we had the opportunity to participate in even 1 or 2 executive committees per year, we could easily recover the funding I think that it would take for this additional attorney position. We will submit some detailed info on this to you, but it would take about $117,000 per year for this particular additional attorney position. And I think we could easily recover that and more every year if we invest in this additional attorney position. Stepping back real quickly to the 2 additional election law unit positions, those would cost about $180,000 per year, but I think it would be money well spent. We all know that elections are important. It's important to make sure our elections are administered fairly and that our laws are enforced fairly. And I think if we add a couple of additional resources to the election law unit, it would really help us in doing that. So that kind of includes the high-level overview and our presentation. Be happy to take questions or be happy to put together any additional information that this committee thinks it might need to make its ultimate decisions.
Thank you. Any questions? Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations, General. And
Thank you, Senator.
Welcome,
Appreciate it.
welcome to the firing line on your first day in office.
Yeah, I'm ready, I think.
Yes. So I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Over the past few years, I have submitted to the Attorney General's office cases of local officials who have been investigated by the Sheriff's Department and recommended for prosecution, in which the county attorney has refused because of, frankly, party affiliation, friendships, and so forth. Would you be willing to accept the responsibility for prosecution by your attorneys of local cases that are investigated and found, what's the word I'm looking for? Qualified for prosecution? Take it out of the hands of the county attorneys.
It's a good question, Senator. Obviously, I can't comment on any particular case, but I think my high-level answer to that would be yes, and that is part of the intended function of the Public Integrity Unit. Now, I can't say that every case involving a local official would be appropriate for us to take on, but I think that so yes, we look at those carefully. And I would anticipate that there would be many instances, well, I should say there would definitely be instances where we would take on a case that the county attorney decided not to take on. But part of that would be because we would develop this public integrity unit that would have, kind of develop expertise in prosecuting those types of cases.
Thank you. Follow up?
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The second question, election law. There are numerous reports of legitimate challengers being corralled 50 to 75 feet away from where they're supposed to be, and moderators or election officials saying, sorry, you have to stay there. And their function by law is to sit there and validate or challenge people that are signing up for same-day registration. What I heard was that there was not adequate manpower when they make the phone calls to the AG to address those questions at that time. And I would just ask you for a commitment to make sure, whether it's temporary workers or whatever, that we have that staff to the 234 towns and now 10 cities or 9 or whatever it is, that when those people are wrongly denied their legal purpose for existing by a moderator, and there were several, I could provide cases if you'd like, that your office will do something instantly to resolve that in terms of you having people on board or provide written direction to moderators or something of that nature.
Yep.
That would be my ask.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Senator. A couple things on that. One is on election day itself, the office is always undertaken we send out a lot of attorneys to staff polling places, and the state also recruits volunteers to sort of serve as temporary staff to help on election day. But your question is well taken, because I think one of the strategies that I would look to employ is training in advance so that we can avoid the day of issues, right? It's a lot. I think you get a big return on your investment if you train in advance so that on election day, when you're stretched for time and stretched for staff and everybody's stressed, you can minimize, the number of mistakes of the nature you described. And I think, I don't know if this was on purpose or if your two questions were meant to fit so well into my budget pitch, but I think this would help. A big help to this would be if we had a little bit more resource in the election law unit. And if we had that, we will absolutely undertake that. And I will say my philosophy, as Attorney General, and because of that as a department head, will be that we will always fulfill our obligations, even if, maybe we wish we could have a few more staff. So the long answer to that question is summed up in two parts. Yes, we will commit to doing that. And The second part of that is if we have additional resources, I think we will do an even better job of doing that than we've done before.
Thank you. Further questions? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations. I
Thank
have
you.
3 questions. Starting with the hospital litigation, do you expect new mergers or other big cases to come within the next 2 years?
Yeah, it's always a little bit unpredictable, Senator, but we have a current, major transaction that we're looking at, which is the Dartmouth and CMC transaction. But I think my answer to that would be yes, at least I would anticipate it, because we have seen the healthcare industry move towards consolidation. The proposed transaction between Wentworth Douglas and Exeter Hospital ultimately didn't go through, but I wouldn't be surprised if, the parties involved in that seek additional affiliations, one or both of them. I think there are other hospitals around the state that may look for partners. So yeah, I would anticipate we'll see more. It's always hard to predict, but I think that your question goes to the resource that we're requesting. These transactions are complicated and they're unique, and so it would help to have someone who can really focus and have expertise in that area. That said, we have plenty of work here at the department. So if it turned out that there weren't as many transactions as we thought, and we had hired someone to this role, we'd put them to work. And then, 2 years from now, I would be very transparent. And if it turned out that we didn't need that resource, we'd shift it to something else, or we would unfund it and look to put resources where maybe there were other areas where the work increased.
Follow up?
Thank you. My second question is about the litigation fund. I think over the last number of eons, we've put in something like $350,000 a year.
Yes.
Which we all know is not nearly enough. And I think last year or the year before, the department came and requested about $2 million a year through fiscal. Are you still funded at $350,000 a year somewhere in House Bill 1?
Yes, I believe that number is at exactly 350,000.
Oh, okay, so we're gonna have the same problem somewhere in House Bill 1. And my final question, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up?
The child advocacy centers were unfunded for $100,000, I think, over the biennium or perhaps per year in the governor's budget. We had a presentation last week from the Judicial Council, and they indicated that child abuse and child sexual assault is high still, even with kids not in school and not having adult eyes on them. So could you speak about that, whether you think that's appropriate? I was sort of surprised you didn't mention it.
Absolutely. There's a couple things I can say on that. First, I do think it's important to remember that when the budget was first submitted, back in the fall, we thought we'd be in a lot worse shape than we are. So I know that the department had to make some difficult decisions on cuts, and that was one of them. I will say, even though that resource isn't in the budget, I think through the various funding streams that have come into the state with COVID relief, there have been a lot of resources put towards that. One example is the Internet Crimes Against Children Fund received an additional $1 million to address to assist with monitoring this stuff and there are these types of cases and instances and investigate and undertake protection efforts. I know that HHS has received, I can't tell you off the top of my head, but there's a list of various additional resources HHS has received on this front. And I will say from the department's perspective, we certainly wouldn't be opposed to restoring this funding. I know the budget's tight, and because this is an area that receives support through many other funding sources, I didn't bring it to the committee as a request to restore funding, but we take it very seriously. We pay close attention to it, and I do think that there are significant resources going towards this, even though this particular resource in the original submitted budget was cut.
Thank you.
Because Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. General Famella, again, congratulations on your job, and I'm sure you'll do it well.
Thank you, Senator.
You're welcome. Just 3 quickies. The delay in the start of the Director of Diversity and Community Outreach by 18 months, I mean, what kind of effect is that going to have on your ability to perform that function?
Well, I think it would delay our ability to perform that function for about 18 months, which is why we would request that funding be restored. Every dollar of taxpayer money is important, but I think the investment that we get back from, I'm not sure off the top of my head how much that would be, but it's less than $100,000, I think, to restore that, to make that funding effective July 1, 2021, I think would be well worth it. And if we train our prosecutors and we build relationships between prosecutors and the community, we're only going to save money on the back end, either from things that happen that shouldn't happen, for which we have to maybe defend litigation, or other problems that arise. So I think it would delay our ability to really stand up that function for 18 months. And I think restoring that funding would ultimately save the state money.
Further question? Follow up. And then the second is the delay in the start for the 2 of the 3 new attorneys. That situation, is that again an ask here that we restore that funding?
Yeah, that would definitely be an ask. I think it's 1 attorney that the funding was delayed for, and it's the civil litigation attorney. And when we say civil litigation, I would really include appeals in that. And we, as I said earlier, this office is by far the largest source of appeals that go up to the Supreme Court. The Office of the Solicitor General is new, but when we created that office back in 2018, we used an existing position. We didn't actually create a new position. So I think a new civil litigation attorney to assist with civil litigation and appeals is something this department could really use. And yeah, we would request that funding be restored in order to allow us to hire that position effective July 1 of this year.
And follow
up.
And the medical legal investigation fund. What budget adjustments are they talking about on the detailed change report that would allow for this to go through without any general funds?
So I'm going to take a stab at answering that, but then I have Kathy. Okay. Actually, Kathy, would you mind answering that question? I'm going to have Kathy Carr jump in and answer that question.
Thank you.
Second.
Hello, Bart.
Yeah, he's coming over.
Good afternoon. So you're asking about the medical legal
Yes.
fund. So the medical legal fund is funded, always has been funded 100% by other funds. And it's about a 45-50 split with money coming from the counties of where an unexpected death occurred, and other money come from the crematories or funeral homes. The money filters through us. We keep $10 of the fees established, and then we pay the rest out to the ADMEs, the Assistant Deputy Medical Examiners, who are contractors throughout the state who attend to any unsuspected death. So all that money just filters out, but it doesn't take general funds.
So just one further question to follow up on it.
Follow up.
So does that money remain in a restricted fund that you've created, that you've designated for this?
Yes, so both funds are revenue funds sources get carried forward. They are continually appropriated so that, sometimes if there's a lot of deaths, we don't have enough money to pay everyone, or we're getting very low on money. So any reserves that we have get brought forward so we can use those reserves to pay our assistant deputy medical examiners.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Further questions? Senator Rosenwald?
Thank you. I read in the newspapers last week that there was an agreement reached about that lorry list. And I'm just wondering if you anticipate any added expense to the department from that we should be aware of.
It's a good question, Senator, and I appreciate that. I don't anticipate an added expense at this time. Well, I should say this. I don't anticipate an added resource burden that we can't handle. And
Okay.
I would note that because the budget already provides some additional resources for a new public integrity unit, that would be a perfect unit within the department to take the lead in implementing the requirements of that legislation if it passes. So I think we're covered based on what's already been requested in the budget.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Any further questions? General, you're proposing a new community outreach director. We just heard from Human Rights Commission that they're basically doing the same thing. So why should we fund them in both positions?
Thank you for the question, Senator. This position would be focused on working with prosecutors in the state. And I think and building relationships between prosecutors and the law enforcement community and community groups and the community at large. I think because this office and the Attorney General is the chief prosecutor and the chief law enforcement officer, I think we are probably best placed to train and educate prosecutors and law enforcement officials. I think the Human Rights Commission focuses more on businesses, employers, a broader swath of the community, but we're narrowly focused on prosecutors and law enforcement. And I think that function is probably best served here.
Okay, thank you. And the other question of the new and restored funding for positions that you were asking for in the Senate, did you ask for those in the House?
So the positions that the House delayed were part of the House budget, and we did, obviously we asked that they not delay them, but they had to make their decisions to balance their budget. The two new positions in the election law unit and the new consumer protection attorney dedicated to multi-state litigation, we did not ask for those in the House. These are new resources that I've identified during my transition over the past 3 weeks and talking to the team here. So I do understand that this is late in the process to request new positions. And I would just note that the only reason that it's so late is because we've had a transition in the office.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have the judicial branch. Good afternoon, Justice McDonald.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We have some slides I'd like to share for the benefit of the committee.
Sure.
Again, good afternoon. I recognize the day is Friday and the hour is late. I will try to be as efficient as possible with our time today. With me are Superior Court Chief Justice Tina Nato, Circuit Court Administrative Judge David King, the Director of the Administrative Office of the Courts, Christopher Keating, and the fiscal manager for the judicial branch, Donna Raymond. Very grateful for the committee's time and your consideration of the judicial branch budget. And it's certainly an honor to be before you in my new role as Chief Justice of our state. If we could go to slide 2, please. New Hampshire has a long tradition of having an exceptionally strong judiciary. The constitutional duties of our judges touch the lives of all the people of our state, from individual disputes of great importance to the parties involved to issues of law decided here at the Supreme Court. Next slide, please. Very briefly, the judicial branch is composed of 2 trial courts, the Superior Court and the Circuit Court, and 1 appellate court, the Supreme Court. And all of our functions are supported by the administrative office of the courts, which handles our personnel, finance, IT, and legal counsel. Next slide, please. Our locations are literally throughout the state, approximately 40 locations located and ultimately servicing every single community in New Hampshire. Slides 5 to 11 cover our response to the pandemic, and in the interest of time, I will not go through them in detail. I do want to make 3 points about it, which are relevant to our greater discussion here. First, throughout the pandemic, the courts remained open and providing access to justice to the people of our state. We were forced to modify our normal operations in order to do so. Second, our ability to continue to provide the essential judicial function was based on our ability to use both existing infrastructure and to deploy new technologies to facilitate remote hearings. Third, and importantly, despite exceptional efforts, there is a significant backlog of cases, generally matters involving contested evidentiary hearings and trials. And that backlog will pose a challenge to both of our trial courts as we fully restore normal operations. Go to slide 12, please. I want to now turn to our request for the coming biennium. There are 2 big picture concepts that govern our budget. Slide 16. 74% of the judicial branch budget is salaries and benefits. Slide 15. Second fact, 94% of our budget is drawn from the general fund. We could go to slide 13. This slide shows an overview of the current biennium versus the House-passed version separated by our accounting units and our sources of funds. And I won't go into this in detail, but obviously we're prepared to respond to any questions from the committee. Next slide, 14, please. This slide shows significant additions to our budget over the current biennium. And you will see that there are certain personnel-related additions and non-personnel-related additions. And I would just note, importantly, the one addition that came over to the Senate from the House is the very last bullet point on the left, sheriff's reimbursement for prisoner custody and control. That was a function that has been handled by DAS. The House has transferred it to the judicial branch. They're new dollars for us, but not new dollars for the state budget. Slide 17, please. I had an opportunity to sit in on the prior presentation by General Formella, and I come to this in a similar circumstance. I was sworn in on March 4th. I did not develop the budget that was presented to the governor and came through to you from the House. In the weeks that I've been here, I have identified some priorities that I am requesting the Senate to consider. Next slide, please. This is a summary of those additional priorities. Number one, improve access to justice in the circuit court. Number two, promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in the judicial branch. And number three, achieve efficiencies by consolidating functions within the judicial branch. Next slide, please. We need to improve access to justice in the circuit court. There are three very important facts here. First, the circuit court's jurisdiction and caseload by far touches more individual lives and the lives of your constituents than the other two courts. Second, the data that I'm going to show you are irrefutable, that there are an insufficient number of judges, thereby creating a systemic issue in that court. Three, this systemic issue, this systemic gap will be greatly enhanced and widened as the court confronts the pandemic-related backlog in the years to come. Slide 20, please. Brief background on the circuit court. It was created by the legislature in 2011 when three existing courts were combined into one: district court, probate court, and family division. They now operate as divisions of the circuit court. The state was able to achieve great efficiencies with respect to management and slimming down the management infrastructure to support those functions. But this consolidation laid the groundwork for the problem we face today, which is a shortage of judicial officers in the circuit courts. Next slide, 21, please. This problem is entirely driven by statute and formula. By statute, the circuit court calculates what are called weighted caseload. And that is basically you take a case type, you assign the amount of time that's needed to resolve it, and then you work backwards, you divide that by 249. That's the number of judge days we have available to us. The weighted caseload for 2020, this is pre-pandemic, is 11,182 days. If you divide that by 249, we need 44.9 circuit court judges. Our statute authorizes 45. Next slide, please. But right now you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner, we are at basically 34 full-time judicial officers with 3 pending vacancies. So we should be at 45. We're at 37 if all the vacancies are filled. And on the right, you will see the gap that creates. The red and the yellow are case needs that are not being met. Now, next slide, please. To date, the circuit court has managed to manage through this situation by using part-time judicial officers and retired judges who either have not reached the mandatory age of 70 or who serve as masters. That resource is rapidly declining. And we are facing a situation where the workload is simply outstripping the number of judicial officers available to us. And as I said, this gap, which is systemic, is going to grow worse because of the backlog that the pandemic created and the need to get to these contested evidentiary hearings, which by definition are resource intensive. And these are dockets like small claims, landlord-tenant, and in contested family division matters. We have heard from elected officials already about concerns about delays in the circuit court. We've heard from your colleagues about this problem. And I wanted to bring it to the committee's attention because of the significance and the real urgency that we are facing given the systemic issue with the pandemic backlog overlaying it. Next slide, please. If we could go 2 more slides. Our solution is to add proposed solution is to add 2 additional circuit court judges, and that would bring our funded total to 39 circuit court judges, 39. And again, our need is 45. This will not completely address the gap, but it will help us manage through certainly through the pandemic-related backlog and help address the systemic gap that we are facing. The next priority, next slide. Go to the next slide. Thank you. Since the murder of George Floyd, our state has been part of a broader national conversation about how our institutions can better respond to concerns on issues involving diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as Attorney General, I had involvement with the very important work of the LEAC Commission last summer. And I note that this legislature has adopted many of its 48 recommendations. LEAC was primarily focused on state and local law enforcement and departments and agencies within the executive branch. Court systems around the country are undertaking a very similar assessment to ensure that the judiciary is meeting our duty to be fair and provide equal justice for all. New Hampshire, in my opinion, needs to be part of this effort. And as I said, this is broadly consistent with what our state committed to through the LEAC Commission. We are at the initial stages. I've been at this for 3 or 4 weeks. We're at the initial stages of our analysis, but it is apparent to me that a successful effort in this regard will need a focus in sustained staff person to assist us in implementing what I anticipate to be recommendations focused both internally on how we can do better in recruiting and retaining and responding to members of the community, and also externally, community engagement. And therefore, I'm asking the Senate to consider an additional position within the judicial branch focused on diversity and inclusion. Finally, next slide, please. Based on my tenure here, I believe that we can achieve efficiencies by consolidating functions within the judicial branch. Go to the next slide. The Administrative Office of the Courts assists the Chief Justice and the Supreme Court in our administrative duties with respect to the judicial branch. And I believe there are opportunities for efficiencies. Part of that is to consolidate those functions which are not now under the AOC umbrella. And there are 2 significant functions: one, the Attorney Discipline Office, and the second, the Office of Bar Admissions. And the concept that we are working on is to bring both of those offices within the umbrella of the AOC so that they can take advantage of the outstanding back office support that the AOC provides for the entire judicial branch. The first step in that is to take advantage of a very immediate opportunity we are facing with respect to location. The Attorney Discipline Office and Office of Bar Admissions are located separately from the AOC. The AOC is located at 1 Granite Place here in Concord. And very recently, we have the opportunity to exercise a right of first refusal on 8,700 square feet, which are immediately adjacent to the AOC, and would provide an ideal space for us to locate and begin locate those 2 other offices within the AOC and begin the process of a consolidation. And ultimately, I anticipate the significant efficiencies that can be achieved. The next slide is shows an overview of our total supplemental budget request, and that's slide 31. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from committee members? Senator Gaida?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations, Chief Justice. As I see the doing more by doing it better slide, and we're looking at efficiencies, yet those efficiencies add $126,000 to each of the fiscal year's budgets. Is there any commensurate reduction in anywhere else in your budget for that space that's being perhaps utilized elsewhere?
Ultimately, that we will save money by not paying rent for the two other functions. But I cannot tell you now what the ROI is on that. There will be an ROI, but I just can't do the math for you right now. What I am saying to the committee is we've got this immediate and late arising opportunity to take advantage of a right of first refusal in very good space that will allow us to bring all of these functions together, avoid the rent that we're paying out at another property, and begin to achieve economies by having, instead of 3 back office operations, 1 back office operation.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Justice, could you provide the committee with the cost of those other rents, just by way of helping us make perhaps a better fiscal decision?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Senator.
Further questions? I do have one. Do you have a human resources department?
Yes, the administrative office of the courts handles our human resources, yes.
Okay, so my follow-up to that is, why can that office not handle the diversity and inclusion that you're looking for, putting one person in to do that? It seems though that would be a function of human resources.
Defer to my colleagues, but we made the internal analysis, and there simply is no capacity within us to take on what is going to be a really focused and resource intensive function. I took a hard look at that, Senator, and I am reluctant to come to the legislature with a request like this, and it's only after having done the analysis.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. And our last presentation today is police standards and training. Good afternoon, John.
Good afternoon, Senator. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is John Skippa, and I am the Director of New Hampshire Police Standards and Training. The mission of New Hampshire Police Standards and Training is to shape, sustain, and strengthen the competency and professionalism of New Hampshire law enforcement in service to our state. Our agency sets the hiring and educational standards for all police, state corrections, and probation parole officers here in New Hampshire. We operate the New Hampshire Police Academy. And this academy is where all local police, county, sheriff, deputy, state troopers, conservation officers, liquor investigators, and any other full-time police or law enforcement officer must attend to become certified. We also operate the part-time police academy, and we operate the New Hampshire Corrections Academy, where every state correctional officer must attend to obtain their correction certification. Additionally, we provide a catalog of specialized, advanced, and in-service refresher training at our facility here in Concord, and regionally around the state to assist officers in completing their annual requirements to maintain their certification. Further, the council holds disciplinary hearings and may suspend or revoke the certification of officers that have violated council rules or committed a crime or an act of moral turpitude. We provide services to law enforcement agencies, including a monthly newsletter that informs the police community about new laws, court decisions, and tactics. We offer assistance and advice in the areas of police administration and management. We are an independent executive branch of government, and we are governed by a 14-member Police Standards and Training Council. We are not affiliated with any law enforcement or prosecutorial agency, thereby avoiding potential conflict of interest with our regulatory function and decertification duties. We provide services with 20 full-time and 5 part-time positions, which include sworn staff, clerical staff, and building and maintenance employees. Our staff is assisted by adjunct instructors, most of whom are unpaid volunteers, and a small number of contracted instructors. We operate a 77,000 square foot training facility, and it's located on 20.87 acres of grounds across from NHTI here in Concord. In speaking to our budget request, I ask for your consideration. I identify 3 documents that I have used as guiding documents in putting this budget together. The 3 documents are Governor Sununu's Executive Order 2020-19, the final report from the Governor's Commission on Law Enforcement Accountability, Community and Transparency, and finally, the New Hampshire Office of Legislative Budget Assistance 2019 audit of police standards and training. These documents set forth a clear roadmap for our organization. They clearly define important benchmarks that were identified, vetted, and agreed upon by a number of stakeholders from different backgrounds and who felt that these benchmarks should be reached in the best interest of New Hampshire law enforcement and ultimately for the service of people of New Hampshire. After the review of the LEAC Commission's report, Governor Sununu issued his executive order in support of those recommendations. Again, I have used these documents to prepare the budget in a way where PSTC can accomplish these important mandates. Presently, the budget that we have put forth represents a $572,841 increase from FY21 adjusted. That's the FY22 request. And the FY23 request demonstrates an increase of 212,162 over the FY22 request. These increases reflect the addition of 2 additional full-time employees and 2 part-time employees that will help us carry the extra load that we need to address based on a number of police reform mandates that have come to us as an organization. Further, you'll see that there is a large increase in our budget that reflects the cost of a much needed record management system and learning management system. And then finally, there is another large increase demonstrates a line that is specifically identified to help support the delivery of crisis intervention training for police officers across the state. The budget that is before you is supported in the governor's budget, and it has gained approval through the House as well. We are requesting this budget so that we can increase the current level of services to the citizens and law enforcement agencies of our state. It will allow us to meet our obligations set forth in Governor Sununu's executive order, addressing a number of items that were identified through the governor's LEAC commission, and also a number of issues that were identified in the 2019 LBS audit, while also continuing to provide all of the recruit and in-service training that we already provide. That is my brief summary of the request, and I stand ready for any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Gaida?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, John, for your presentation. I'm going to presume that line 102 is for the mental health training, 90,000 in 22 and 120 in 23.
That is correct, Senator, and thank you for your support on that. It's a very much needed area of training that is really sought after and very expensive for us to deliver, and we appreciate that support.
Follow up.
Follow up.
As I look at line 67, I see training of providers, and it goes up 2.5 times what your actual 2020 was. Can you explain what that is about? What does that encompass?
Thank you very much for that question, Senator. In fact, the 2020 actuals reflect an expenditure of $69,000. It's important to remember that on my very first day as the Director of Police Standards and Training, it was March 16th, which was the day that the state of New Hampshire began rolling out some pretty proactive guidance and direction with regard to response to the COVID pandemic. Based on the pandemic, I chose to eliminate the in-service program for a variety of reasons. Every police agency was strapped in terms of just staffing so that they could protect their own communities. We had to keep our building as clean as possible because we still had to maintain our recruit training. We could not stop that. And so eliminating in-service officers from entering the building was the only other option. And candidly, most outside vendors could not travel into the state of New Hampshire if they came from outside the state to deliver that in-service program because of travel prohibitions as well. So that's why you see that number very, very small. It was directly related to the impact of the COVID pandemic. You also see an increase in the budget that is in front of you. That budget increase is to help this agency be able to address a number of LEAC issues or mandates that were set forth that include annual training for every single police officer in the state of New Hampshire. We're talking about right around 4,100 police officers certified in the state of New Hampshire. Not only that, but the LEAC recommendation, and candidly a recommendation that needed to be made was we only required 8 hours of annual in-service training. And we were really far behind a vast majority of states here in the country with regard to ongoing in-service training for incumbent police officers. And the national average falls right around 24 hours per year annually. Based on now mandated topics for in-service training, there is also an increase in annual hours of in-service training. And so to address those two changes, I had to increase that line to be able to address the increase in training opportunities so the officers could reach those mandatory in-service hours of training. And I hope that answers your question, sir.
Does, and I thank you. And keep up the good work, John.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Hennessy.
Thank you. Hi, can you tell me what is in line 24? Maintenance other than building grounds.
Yes, ma'am. And I apologize. The previous two presenters and I all share the same situation. We're kind of new to this, and so I apologize if it takes me a little bit to work through this. Yes, ma'am. Excellent question. Thank you. That substantial increase reflects the cost of the record management system and learning management system that we needed to put in place. We are working presently with Benchmark Analytics, which is the provider that is custom building our record management and learning management system. This software is going to allow our agency to very, very accurately track police officers from the time they start in the business all the way to the time that they retire. It will track all of their training. It will track promotions, demotions. It can track disciplinary actions and any decertification process. This was something that was identified in the 2019 LBA audit. And then certainly with police reform, we felt that this was very important to move on. In last year's budget, there was a capital line that allowed the initial purchase. And at the end of the LEAC recommendations, the governor provided us permission to move forward on that purchase for this record management system. And so that number that you see there is the annual subscription rate to maintain the system. And I hope that answers your question, Senator.
It does. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good weekend.
Have a good afternoon. With that, folks, we have concluded our business today in our presentations. We will be meeting again on Monday at 1 o'clock. And Chair recognizes Senator Hennessy.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, okay.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Senator Hennessy, seconded by Senator Gaida. We'll call roll. Senator Hennessy?
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro? Senator Gaida?
Yes, sir.
Senator Rosenwald?
Yes.
Senator Morse?
Yes.
And Senator Reagan has been excused. And the chair votes yes, and we will be adjourned. Thank you for joining us today.